Chapter 1395. Since last night, a rumor had been spreading through the army. The more it spread, the more suspicious it became. Have you heard? The young General Chu who used to follow His Highness is actually a woman. Is that true? I've seen that young general before. She's handsome, brave, and smart. She's not an ordinary person. Don't make things up. How can it be false? I heard that she's His Highness' beloved woman. Because His Highness couldn't bear to part with her, he brought her into the army. Yesterday, someone saw her appear in the army. Last night, she stayed in His Highness' tent and didn't come out. Think about it, who is His Highness? He never lets anyone get close to him. Normally, he doesn't leave anyone when he's resting. Think about it carefully. So His Highness really delayed proper business because of a beauty? No wonder he told us to bide our time these past few days. It turns out he's enjoying the grace of a beauty. These people all talked at once, as if they had seen it with their own eyes. They made it sound as if they were catching wind and chasing shadows. Chu Qingyan had disguised herself as a man and risked her life for Sichuan. She had defeated the Southern Blue Army many times, but these soldiers at the bottom of the hierarchy had never seen her before. They had only heard of her accomplishments. Now that they knew she was a woman, they began to doubt her victories. So you're saying that this person was just lucky? Either the soldiers she brought were strong, or she just happened to run into a dead rat. That's how she gained so much fame. In ancient times, if a woman defeated a man, where would they put their face? In an instant, their admiration for Chu Qingyan turned into disdain and even slander. Some people in the crowd quietly retreated. The task of creating rumors had been accomplished. Now, all they had to do was wait for the rumors to ferment. At this time, Chu Qingyan, who was in the dark, was slowly walking toward the tent for discussion. After last night, she and Big Ice Cube had reached an agreement. She would continue to accompany him as Chu Qingyan, but in exchange, she had to live in his tent. She would use the excuse of saving supplies for the army. Chu Qingyan had become more and more accustomed to this person who would take advantage of her whenever he found an opportunity. Sure enough, he was an insatiable wolf. However, ever since she came out of the Big Ice tent, she felt that the atmosphere around her was a little strange. The soldiers who were either standing or sitting down to rest were looking at her with a strange light in their eyes. As a stranger who had just entered the camp, it was normal for people to size her up. However, she felt that these gazes were very unfriendly. Not only were they unfriendly, they were also filled with disgust and contempt. This made her frown involuntarily. However, she did not reprimand or stop him. Instead, she whispered a few words to Su Yi who was following her. Su Yi glanced at the people around him, nodded, and went down. After giving her instructions, Chu Qingyan continued to lead Jin Xian and the others to the main tent as if nothing had happened. But before she reached the main tent, she heard the sound of planks being struck and miserable screams rising and falling. She focused her mind and couldn't help but quicken her pace. The ones guarding outside the tent were not normal guards, but the fierce cavalry led by Hualing. Chu Qingyan was a little surprised. Hualing immediately came up when he saw her and said in a low voice, "Little princess, there are several soldiers being punished inside. Master said for this subordinate to pass this message to you. You can go back and rest today and come back tomorrow to participate in the discussion." This morning, Big Ice Cube had asked her to come over, and now he had asked her to go back. She didn't know what had happened inside, but something big must have happened for Big Ice Cube to punish the generals at this checkpoint. Since he had given the order, she would listen. The discussion was just a formality, and the main purpose was to meet the generals and get to know each other. There was no hurry for now. Hualing saw her agree and couldn't help letting out a sigh of relief. Chu Qingyan saw his expression and felt it was strange, but she still turned to leave. Halfway there, Su Yi came back with an ugly expression. Chu Qingyan did not wait to go back and found a secluded place to listen to his report. "Master, there are rumors in the army that are unfavorable to you and His Highness. They have exposed your identity as Chu Qingyan and said that you have confused His Highness, caused chaos in the army, and even wanted to lead the army into battle. This rumor is spreading like wildfire and it is becoming more and more ridiculous." No wonder Su Yi had an angry expression. Jean Exen and the others also had angry expressions when they heard this. Chu Qingyan curled her lips and said with a smile that was not a smile, "No wonder I was wondering why there were so many people staring at me on the way here. I thought it was because of my beauty, but I never thought it would be like this." Master's self-mockery was funny, but no one could laugh. Su Yi clenched his fist and continued, "Master, when I came back, I also heard that there were several generals who heard the news and asked His Highness to confirm it. They wanted His Highness to send you back." This made Chu Qingyan think of the sound of caning she heard outside the main tent. It turned out that the big ice cube was angry because of this. No wonder Hualing was guarding outside and did not let her in. It seemed that the big ice cube wanted to suppress this matter and not let her be affected. This rumor was obviously directed at her. Even if the big ice cube could suppress it for a while, it could not suppress it forever. "Master, why don't we arrest those people who are causing trouble and punish them severely?" Su Si suggested angrily. "No, gossip is a fearful thing. You can stop one person, but you can't stop others. It will be easier for people to think that Master is angry out of humiliation." Su Er waved his hand and disagreed. "Then are we just going to let them splash dirty water on Master?" Although Su Wu restrained himself, his eyes were about to spit fire. Now, besides Jean Exayan, Su Yi and Su Wu, who were following Chu Qingyan, were guarding in the open, and the rest were working in the dark. Several people finished talking one after another, but there was no result. If it could be solved directly with a knife, they would not even blink their eyes. But this matter could not be solved with fists at all. And if it was not handled well, it was very likely to cause chaos in the army's morale. After saying that there was no result, everyone remembered that their master had not said a word since just now. They could not help but look over. They saw her standing under the green tree, her wide robe fluttering in the wind. Her eyes were calm, and the corners of her mouth were slightly raised with a faint smile. Every time they saw their master like this, they knew that their master had already made a decision, and their hearts felt lighter. Jean Exen stepped forward and asked, "Master, what should we do?" "The rumor is directed at me, so I should fight it, right? It is not my style to hide in my shell when being schemed against." Although the rumor was directed at her, it was actually an opportunity to cause trouble for the big ice cube. It was not difficult to guess the intention of the person behind this. Chu Qingyan reached out and flicked the dead leaves that fell on her shoulders. She straightened her clothes and put her hands behind her back. She smiled faintly at her subordinates and said, "Accompany me to meet those people." After saying that, she walked in the direction of the main tent again, leisurely as if she was just taking a walk. Seeing that their master had a card up her sleeve, everyone looked at each other and immediately followed with a smile. It seemed that someone was going to be unlucky. Chapter 1396. When Hualing saw Chu Qingyan return, he couldn't help but be stunned. Especially when he saw the unique smile on the little princess face that sent chills down people's spines, he couldn't help but swallow his saliva and confess. "Master doesn't want the little princess to worry, so I ask for the little princess understanding." Chu Qingyan gave a soft snort. "I know you're loyal. This time, I'll put it on the tab and settle it with you later." As she spoke, she lifted the curtain and strode in. Hualing watched the little princess go in. How could he dare to stop her? He wanted to cry but had no tears. He was only following orders. If he knew that he would offend the little princess, he would have left Feng Yu outside and not take on this task. Xiao Su heard the noise and looked over. He saw a figure as thick as fire appear in the tent. He was slightly stunned. Didn't he have someone invite her back? Chu Qingyan's appearance stunned all the generals standing inside. What a handsome young man. When did such a person exist in the army? Why hadn't they seen her before? Some of the people who had participated in the Southern Blue Army recognized her. Chu Qingyan, the young general who had repelled the enemy by himself. At the same time, he was the main character of this rumor. They looked at the people being beaten with boards and then looked at the person in the main seat. They didn't know what to say. "Why did you come here?" Xiao Su watched her walk over step by step and couldn't help but raise a brow. Chu Qingyan walked in front of him and gave a military salute. Then she smiled and replied, I heard that a colleague was punished because of this one's matter. As the person involved, this one thought that it was necessary to come and take a look. Xiao Su narrowed his eyes. It could be seen that the little fellow already knew, but he didn't approve of her appearing at this time. There's nothing to believe in just rumors. You go back first. This Wang will summon you if there's something. Even she could hear the protectiveness in his words. Everyone present was smart, so how could they not hear it? Like this, she had to intervene even more. Your Highness, this matter concerns this one's reputation. This one can't just stand by and watch. Seeing that she had made up her mind, Xiao Su lowered his eyes and stopped trying to stop her. Then what are you going to do? For the time being, I'll stop the caning of a few of my colleagues. Since it's because of me, I'd like to hear what they have to say and see if they can convince me. She emphasized the last few words, but her smile was still as calm as ever. Just now, when everyone saw His Highness protect this young man without any principles, their hearts that originally did not believe in the rumors could not help but waver. The more they looked at this jade-faced young man, the more he looked like a girl. The way they looked at him also changed. Chu Qingyan turned a deaf ear. Her words were directed at those who were gritting their teeth and glaring at her, but her gaze was directed at the person in the main seat. There was a faint smile in her eyes, as if to reassure him not to interfere. Xiao Su received her message. After a moment of silence, he raised his hand to stop the punishment. All right, this prince allows it. Hearing this, everyone present breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that His Highness was not unprincipled in his defense. However, everyone had forgotten that Chu Qingyan was the one who had made this request, and their Highness had agreed to it without any hesitation. There were 3 generals who were lying on the ground being beaten. They were all strong and sturdy, and their faces were mighty. Although they were being caned, they were unyielding and did not beg for mercy. It must be known that the military canes were not normal canes, and the executors were the best in the fierce cavalry. Every hit was real, and they were lucky to be able to withstand it. May I ask the names of these generals? Chu Qingyan made a hand gesture. Su Yi and the others helped the 3 up. Kneeling was better than lying on the ground. She did not want others to say that she was humiliating these generals. When she came in to talk to His Highness, they had already guessed her identity. Today, they were reduced to this state because of her. They were angry, but because His Highness was present, they had no choice but to reply. Wu Lin, Lu Weiyun, Hong Jianhua. She had heard the names of these people before. Although she knew about Big Ice Cube's training, most of them were his old generals. However, she had never participated in it, so it was normal that these people did not know her. However, she knew their names because Big Ice Cube had given her a list of names. These 3 people were good fighters who had followed him to the north and south, but brave and wise generals were too rare. These 3 people were too honest, suitable for charging and breaking through enemy lines, but not suitable for brain work, so it was normal for them to be used as guns. At the same time, she was also very clear that these 3 people had high prestige in the army. If this matter was not handled well, although it would not affect their trust in Big Ice Cube, it would be a big obstacle for her to stay in the army. Generals, this one has no enmity with you, and we have never met before. Why are you wronging this one, Chu? She stood in front of them, cupped her hands, and asked with a smile. There was no anger from being wronged, but instead, there was humility and warmth. If this person confronted them from the beginning, these 3 people with bad tempers would not let her off easily. Now, this jade-like person in front of them was polite. As the saying goes, one does not hit a smiling person. They suppressed their anger and let one of them speak. We have no enmity with you, but if you continue to stay in the army, I'm afraid you will have a deadly enmity with the army. Wu Lin looked at her coldly. Although his face was full of anger, he was still polite, at least in his own eyes. Chu Qingyan found it funny. General Wu, why do you say that? At this time, Lu Weiyun said, May I ask this little brother, are you a man or a woman? Such a straightforward question made Xiao Su's eyebrows twitch. Just as he was about to stand up and scold her, the person in front of him suddenly turned her head and blinked at him with her back facing everyone. She was mischievous and cute, but her eyes were pleading for him not to interfere. Xiao Su saw that she was mischievous and was not affected at all. He could not help but suppress his desire to stand up for her and leaned back in his chair again. Since the little fellow was so confident, he would wait a little longer. If it really did not work out, he would clean up the mess for her. Seeing his reaction, Chu Qingyan looked back at the people in front of her with satisfaction. The three of them were not the only ones who wanted to know the answer to this question. The generals standing on both sides also stared at her with bright eyes. Chu Qingyan curled her lips and crossed her arms. She said without bashfulness, "That's right, I'm a woman." Once these words were said, everyone was shocked and angry, especially Lu Weiyun who had asked the question just now. He pointed at Chu Qingyan and said to Xiao Su bitterly, "Your Highness, look. This person admitted that she's a woman. Do you still want to keep her in the army? If this were to spread, what would the thousands of soldiers think? Where would your Highness put his face?" Before Xiao Su could say anything, Chu Qingyan had already spoken. She pretended to be surprised. "General Lu, you're exaggerating. Although I'm a woman, I can also do something for your Highness. Why would you say that it would humiliate your Highness if this were to spread? As a foxy woman, you use your beauty to serve the emperor. Sooner or later, His Highness will delay his great undertaking because of you." Wu Lin scolded her angrily. Chu Qingyan's expression changed slightly. "You mean that His Highness's will is not firm enough and a mere woman can disturb his mind?" These words instantly pinned the crime of slandering a superior. Wu Lin did not dare to look at the person on the main seat and angrily rebuked, "You're twisting words and forcing logic." Chu Qingyan snorted softly. Her previous modesty and gentleness receded, and the restrained light instantly bloomed. Her beautiful eyes glittered. "It's quite boring to quarrel. Why don't we make a bet?" Chapter 1397. Quarrel? She actually said that their questioning was quarrel? It wasn't just Wu Lin's group of three. Everyone else's faces twitched as they looked at the person standing in the center, who wasn't afraid of anything. What kind of person was she? Bet? Are you treating the military rules as child's play? A general at the side couldn't stand it and retorted. Chu Qingyan shrugged. "It's because I'm not treating it as child's play that I want to compete with you, the most outstanding people under His Highness." "What? You don't dare?" After this pause, she flattered them and provoked them. The first part smoothed their hair and the second part successfully made them fall into the trap. "Let's compete then. Do you think I'm afraid of a woman like you?" Wu Lin said valiantly and disdainfully. However, as his words fell, he felt a cold wind blow over his neck. He immediately shrunk his neck back and looked at the person on the main seat. He saw that His Highness was calmly looking at everyone and did not look in his direction. He couldn't help but let out a light breath. However, he didn't dare to say those curses in the general's army. General Wu agreed. "What about the others? Don't say that this Chu bullied you when the time comes and renege on the bet." Chu Qingyan was like a cool breeze as she looked at everyone with a smile, as if she was just asking how the weather was today. During this time, someone stretched his neck and asked, "Tell us, what do you want to bet and what do you want to compete in? Otherwise, when the time comes and we'll be led by the nose, we won't be able to do anything." The question hit the nail on the head. Not only Wu Lin and Hua Ling, but even Xiao Su was very curious. What method did his little fellow want to use to deal with the current situation? Chu Qingyan curled her lips and a beautiful smile hung on her lips. She spread her hands and looked a little innocent. "I also don't know what to compete in. Why don't you all decide? I believe that you won't propose anything too outrageous." After saying this, she added a very bright smile, full of trust. Everyone didn't know how to react to her words. This person had just taken the initiative to propose a bet, and they thought that she had come prepared. They didn't expect that the final choice would fall into their hands. Should they say that this person was too conceited, too confident, or too brainless? When Hua Ling and the others heard this, they couldn't help looking at their little princess with worried expressions. Although they knew she was bold, wasn't she a bit too bold today? Xiao Su furrowed his brows. He didn't quite agree. This was too much nonsense. He subconsciously wanted to stop her. Most of these people were trained by him, so he knew what they were capable of. If this continued, she would be at a disadvantage. However, Lu Weiyun and the others' faces turned red. They grinned and said, "You said it yourself. Don't say that we bullied you." "That's right, Your Highness can testify to what I said just now." Chu Qingyan did not look at him. Instead, she turned sideways and cupped her fists at her iceberg. She knew that he would not be able to hold himself back from standing up for her. She decided to strike first and use her words to shut him up. Xiao Su looked at her. This little fellow was becoming more and more good at grasping his thoughts. He loosened his clenched fists. It was unknown what he thought of in the end, but his brows relaxed. He slowly nodded to his subordinates who were afraid he would be biased. "This king will testify." Everyone instantly let out a sigh of relief. They began to think about how to embarrass Chu Qingyan. Letting them men compete with a woman was already a kind of humiliation. If they lost to her, it would be a great humiliation, so they would not let her have an easy time. However, the clear voice sounded again. "Has everyone thought about what to compete in? I believe that in front of His Highness, the competition everyone proposes will be able to convince everyone." Wu Lin snorted coldly. "With your mother." Before he finished speaking, his neck was pressed down again. He almost knelt down again. He couldn't help but grit his teeth and change his words. "Competing with Miss, we naturally will not let others say that we are bullying the weak." When he finished speaking, he was already drenched in cold sweat and his hands and feet were cold. Xiao Su calmly retracted his gaze. How could his people be insulted? "All right, then may I ask what the competition is?" "You can propose 3 types of competition." Chu Qingyan nodded and asked with a smile. "Since it is in the military, then it will be a competition that will be used in battle." Hong Jianhua, who had been silent all this time, looked coldly at Chu Qingyan. Then he turned and cupped his hands towards Xiao Su on the main seat. "Your Highness, this general feels that we can propose a competition. This miss can propose a competition. The last competition will be decided by Your Highness to show fairness." Hong Jianhua had a high position in the military. When he spoke, not many people objected. Xiao Su looked admiringly at the speaker and nodded, aloud. Since the leader had spoken, she naturally had no objections. However, Chu Qingyan still looked at Hong Jianhua. This person had a clear distinction between public and private matters and did not bully the weak. She admired him. "We propose that the first competition be archery," Lu Weiyun said. Everyone nodded. Hua Ling and the others showed strange smiles. Xiao Su nodded. "How about the second competition be fist skills?" The moment he said that, everyone agreed. They saw that Chu Qingyan was so skinny and weak. One punch from her would probably be enough to kill her. "Alright, it's your turn. What do you want to compete in? Embroidery? Playing the zither?" "No matter what you want to compete in, as long as you propose something you are good at. Since it's best 2 out of 3, we can give you a handicap." Wu Lin started to push again. Before the competition started, he could already see her being completely defeated. How could their little princess be humiliated like this? Compared to the anger of Hua Ling and the others, Chu Qingyan gave a happy laugh. She asked the silent Hong Jianhua on the side, "I wonder what General Hong is good at?" Hong Jianhua did not understand, but he still honestly replied, "This old man likes to practice and has some skill in this field." "General Hong is too modest. Your sand table practice is something no one here can compare to," someone said with a smile. As soon as this was said, others quickly agreed. Chu Qingyan's eyes revealed a smile. She said to Xiao Su, "Then for the last competition, this Chu proposes a military formation." When these words fell, the tent fell silent. No one spoke. In other words, they were all stunned by Chu Qingyan's shameless words. Hong Jianhua was also stunned. When he saw Chu Qingyan's smiling eyes, he felt that this brat was too arrogant. His heart turned cold as he cupped his hands and said, "Then this old man will be bold enough to accept your challenge." "I couldn't ask for more." Chu Qingyan replied with a smile. "All right, these 3 competitions will be the content of the competition. The competition will be set for the day after tomorrow." Xiao Su looked over everyone and lightly said. No one had any objections. The clear voice sounded again. Chu Qingyan walked out under everyone's gaze. Seeing her, someone sneered, "Could it be that you're afraid and want to go back on your word?" Chu Qingyan raised her brows and smiled. What this Chu wants to say is that the stakes have not been set yet. Chapter 1398. Everyone finally reacted. They had been focused on the competition and had forgotten about this. Wu Lin was a straightforward person, so he immediately said in a fierce voice, "If you lose, of course you will be punished according to the military rules. Especially for someone like you who disguised as a man to sneak into the army and even want to participate in the war. If you are not severely punished, it will be hard to convince the others." Although everyone felt that Wu Lin's words were a bit rough, it was more or less the same meaning. Chu Qingyan expressed that she had no objections. "Then if I win, no matter what I do in the army, you cannot interfere. Of course, I will not do anything that will harm the interests of the army." When she said this, someone laughed out loud. "Then we'll talk after you win, you brat who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth." She did not waste time arguing and looked at Hong Jianhua, asking for his opinion. "All right, it's a promise." Hong Jianhua did not feel that she could win, so he indifferently agreed to her bet. Chu Qingyan gave a clear laugh and cupped her hands to the generals present. "Then when the time comes, I ask everyone not to go back on their words." Although only the 3 generals in front of her were punished for suing her, there were more than 3 people who were targeting her. When everyone saw her like this, they gave a snort and returned a bow. "I'll let you be proud for now. Let's see how you'll cry and beg for mercy when the time comes." Some of the generals who had followed Chu Qingyan before had seen her methods. Their hearts were beating fast and they were not as optimistic and confident as the others. She was a brave and resourceful general. Xiao Su saw that everyone had achieved their goal, so he waved his hand to have them leave. After a while, there was only Chu Qingyan, Hualing, and the others left in the tent. "Little princess consort, your performance just now made all of us sweat." Hualing exaggeratedly patted his chest as if he was really scared. Chu Qingyan gave a soft laugh. Since she dared to say this, she naturally had a way to deal with it. "All right, don't worry. I never fight an unprepared battle." Hearing her words, Hualing and the others let out a sigh of relief and their lips curled up. They just knew that there was nothing the little princess consort couldn't do. "You're too mischievous." At this moment, Xiao Su's cold voice sounded in the tent. Chu Qingyan's back was facing him at this moment. She pursed her lips and smiled. Her real trouble had just arrived. If she didn't deal with this leader, everything she had done would be for naught. She turned around and met his gaze. She took a few steps forward until she was a table away from him and had nowhere to go. Only then did she stop. She put her hands on the table and said seriously, "How am I messing around? I just want to use my own ability to solve my own problems. This isn't a difficult task. You don't have to do it yourself. I can help you solve it." Xiao Su pinched the space between his eyebrows. Looking at the little guy's disposition, he must have prepared a lot of words for him. As expected. Because of their objections and doubts, you pulled out the leaders and gave them a beating. Is this the solution you're talking about? She questioned relentlessly. Killing the chicken to warn the monkey. Even if it can't block the mouths of the people, at least it can stop them from openly opposing. Xiao Su had his own ideas. This move was just a temporary response. He still had a backup plan, but before he could use it, the little guy had appeared on her own. However, her response today was similar to his idea. Chu Qingyan shook her head. "Big ice block, what you're doing will only make people afraid of your majesty and not dare to mention it in public. However, there's no guarantee that they will talk about it in private. It will affect the morale of the army. The war is imminent. Hundreds of thousands of enemy troops are eyeing us covetously. Only by uniting can we resist the enemy. If we have internal strife, the people outside only need to make a move and we will be defeated." Xiao Su was silent. The little guy's words were not without reason. It was just that he was unwilling to let her come out and suffer such injustice. Seeing his silence, she knew that she had persuaded him. She immediately put in more effort and told him her thoughts. "Big ice block, I know you're trying to protect me. However, This kind of protection is more likely to make those rumors true. People will think that I'm a femme fatale who only knows how to charm their generals. Why don't you let me walk out into the open and officially reveal my identity as Chu Qingyan? After all, didn't we agree that we would fight side by side? Then, all these troubles that will affect our progress must be resolved quickly. So, instead of blocking them, it's better to be open and honest. Let's lay out these problems openly and let me prove myself. Let them know that women are not as good as men. She was not a person who was overcautious. She would be affected by rumors and slanders. Doing things her own way was her real personality. However, if it affected the Big Ice Blocks plan because of her, then she was willing to stand up and deal with these troubles. And this is an opportunity. I want to use this opportunity to gain a foothold in the army. I want to help you better. The moment her words fell, Xiao Su's expression couldn't help but soften. He reached out and lifted her onto his lap. Wrapping his arms around her waist, the corners of his lips rose. What a good, better to be open than to be closed. Ian, you're making me look at you in a new light. How can there be weak soldiers by Mighty Eagle's side? She smiled brightly at him. Now she was sure that she had successfully convinced him. Xiao Su smiled and shook his head. Saying so much because you're afraid that I'll interfere? Hearing this, Chu Qingyan couldn't help but glare at him. That's right. Who doesn't know that you have the most tricks up your sleeve? Although you agreed to my competition on the surface, if you want to interfere and make the competition fail, it's not like there's no other way, right? The moment she finished speaking, she felt her lips being lightly bitten. The main culprit raised his head and licked his lips. There was a deep smile in his eyes. Smart. Praising someone without giving a reward and asking for a reward is too much. She rolled her eyes at him in annoyance. Isn't this king your best reward? Xiao Su's face did not turn red as he asked back. Chu Qingyan's face turned red. This person was becoming more and more shameless. You're not serious at all. In front of my wife, what is there to be serious about? Aren't you treating me like an outsider? Xiao Su gently pecked her again with a happy smile. How could Chu Qingyan be the one to suffer a loss? When he came close again, she pulled down his neck and fiercely blocked him, taking the initiative. It was rare for this little fellow to take the initiative, so how could Xiao Su let her go? In an instant, the temperature in the tent rose and the two of them were locked in a stalemate. Hua Ling and the others had unknowingly left and stood guard at the door, not letting anyone come close. After an unknown amount of time, Chu Qingyan leaned into his embrace and stared at him while panting. It looks like I'll really have to bear the crime of being a femme fatale. Originally she just wanted to punish him and immediately leave, but who would have thought that he would not let her go? She could only bite the bullet and face him, but it was a pity that she ended up throwing away her helmet and armor. Xiao Su revealed an iron-blooded smile when he heard this. Only a useless person would be confused by beauty. I'm not that kind of person, so you don't need to feel this kind of burden. Chu Qingyan's lips curled up. This was her big ice block, so strong. She liked it. Chapter 1399. The news from Xiao Su's side quickly reached Xiao Ran's side. That's right, we have to disintegrate them from the inside. Even if Royal Brother lets Qingyan leave the army, the gap between him and the soldiers will still exist. There will no longer be no grudge in his heart. This step, Lord Yan, is brilliant. After Xiao Ran glanced at the contents of the letter, he smiled happily. Yan Shi hurriedly cupped his hands and said modestly, Your Highness is too kind. However, if the King of England insists on keeping Miss Chu in the army, although it is not beneficial to us, as long as we instigate a little more, the morale of the army will be even more unstable. At that time, we will take advantage of the situation. No matter how powerful Miss Chu's beasts are, we will definitely be able to take them down with our manpower. The corners of Xiao Ran's eyes rose. Standing on the high mountain, he raised his hand and pressed down on his fluttering sleeves. His brows relaxed. Okay, let the army move forward secretly. They must arrive in 2 days. However, Xiao Ran did not receive the news that Chu Qingyan had challenged the soldiers. because the spy simply did not have time to deliver the news. Inside the tent, there was a person kneeling. Chu Qingyan drank her tea slowly, as if that person did not exist. Jean Exon, Su Yi and the others were busy with their own matters and did not seem to notice the person kneeling. In this strange atmosphere, that person could not help but tremble and say, "What do you want?" This lowly one still has to go on patrol. Now that I have been caught by you, if the higher-ups can't find this lowly one, they will definitely say that this lowly one has neglected his duty. However, no one paid attention to him, as if he was talking to himself and singing a one-man show. The person continued to speak a few more times, but the effect was still the same. After a whole morning he spoke until his mouth was dry, but no one took him seriously at all. That person clenched his fists as if he had been bullied. He raised his hand and angrily pointed at Chu Qingyan, who was sitting above him. With a righteous look he said, "Chu Qing, you're just His Highness woman. You don't have the right to arrest people. The rumors outside are indeed true. You're here to cause trouble for the army. I'm going to tell the soldiers to drive you out so that you won't cause trouble for the army and the general." Just as this person stood up and was about to leave, he was unexpectedly stopped by Su Yi and the others. He struggled with all his might and shouted, "You're just a woman. You captured soldiers without permission and used lynchings. Where do you put the military rules? Where do you put the general? The general may have been deceived by you, but we won't. My death is nothing to be regretted, but there will always be someone to deal with you." This person was the captain of one of the battalions in the army. He was in charge of 200 men and his name was Su Hu. When he was tired of shouting, Chu Qingyan closed the teacup lid and looked at him leisurely. "Captain Su, you should be thirsty after talking so much, right? Come, drink some water to quench your thirst. You'll have the strength to shout a few more times later." Su, who had been observing her this entire time, when he saw her smiling at him, his heart trembled. What was this person planning? What do you mean by this? What could this Chu mean? I just want to ask Captain Su what you mean by this. This Chu has no enmity with you, so why are you slandering this Chu? Chu Qingyan appeared to be in a good mood. Su, who was shocked. Could it be that his actions had been exposed? I don't understand what you're talking about. Captain Su, are you planning to play dumb with this Chu? Chu Qingyan put down her teacup and stood up. She slowly walked towards him. What are you trying to do? I'm telling you, don't mess around. Otherwise, once I shout, you'll be punished by military law before you even need to compete with the others. Su, who saw her walking towards him with a smile and felt an inexplicable chill in his heart. He hurriedly spoke up. Chu Qingyan stopped 3 steps away from him. She smiled as if she was just catching up with an old friend. Just now, no one outside made a sound when you shouted until your throat was hoarse. Do you think shouting now will be of any use? You. Su, who finally understood why there was no sound when he shouted to attract the attention of the people outside. It turned out that this person had already set up a trap. He couldn't help but feel a little flustered. Captain Su, this Chu admires your talent. In just a few short days, you were able to disguise yourself as someone else without being discovered. Unfortunately, justice grinds slowly but surely. You still fell into this Chu's hands. Chu Qingyan turned around and walked towards the main seat. Su, who didn't expect to be exposed so quickly. He raised his hand and was about to slap Chu Qingyan's back when Su Yi, who had been watching him closely, raised his hand and chopped Su Hu's shoulder. Su Hu spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground. He struggled to raise his head and saw Chu Qingyan's smiling face. His face instantly turned ashen. He didn't expect that after so many years of disguise, this would be the first time someone had seen through his disguise. Unwilling to accept this, he asked, "How did you see through me? You want to know? Then tell me what you know." Chu Qingyan sat back in her chair and looked down at him condescendingly. The smile on her face was no longer the same as before. Instead, there was a hint of coldness. "Don't you dare." As soon as he opened his mouth, Su San stepped on his back, causing him so much pain that he couldn't continue. You didn't expect that the famous master of disguise, Lu Bai, would fall into my hands, right? Su Hu, who was still struggling, looked at her in shock. His eyes were filled with fear. How did you know that I am Lu Bai? Ethereal, who was standing quietly at the side, stepped forward with a faint smile and tore off his human skin mask, revealing his original face. It was a delicate face that didn't match his burly appearance at all. You know how to take off my mask? Lu Bai was so agitated that he couldn't speak clearly. Ethereal ignored him and returned to her original position. Take him away for interrogation. Chu Qingyan saw that she had achieved her goal. She ignored the anger in Lu Bai's eyes and waved her hand to have someone take him away. She leaned back in her chair leisurely. Lu Bai was not satisfied. He wanted to say something, but his mouth was gagged and he was dragged away. After the tent returned to silence, Shi Ning, who was at the side, asked her master in confusion, "Master, you spent half a day just to expose his true identity? Why didn't you ask him why he became a spy?" Su Er, who was standing at the side, answered for his master with a smile. "Miss Xining, you may not know this, but this man is a famous master of disguise in Jianghu. He is arrogant, and if you interrogate him directly, you won't be able to get anything out of him. However, he has always boasted that no one can see through his disguise. Master is taking advantage of this fact to set up today's trap. Once a person's proudest thing was destroyed, it would be much easier to interrogate him." Xining immediately understood. "Su Er, you are so smart." She then gave her mistress a thumbs up. "Mistress, you are so smart." At the side, Jean Xian's eyes fell on Xining and Su Er. He could not help but squint. Ethereal stood still and looked at the young princess who was smiling sweetly. She admired her methods. However, Su Er was only half right. This kind of thing could be done by others, but the young princess did it herself. It was not that she did not believe in the ability of her subordinates, but this person spread rumors and hurt her mistress's dignity. The young princess had always been one who would not offend others if they did not offend her. But this time, her mistress was involved. The young princess had to personally avenge her mistress. A person was used to standing at the top. Once he was kicked down and the thing he was proud of was trampled under the feet of others, it was more painful than destroying the person. After a while, Su Er came in excitedly. "Mistress, Lu Bai has confessed." Chu Qingyan smiled. "Good. It was time to sow discord." Chapter 1400. Master, should we report to His Highness about Lu Bai? After reporting Lu Bai's confession, Su Yi asked seriously. Since yesterday, when he found out that someone was spreading rumors to slander His Highness and His Highness immediately ordered them to investigate thoroughly. As expected, someone was fanning the flames behind the scenes. Chu Qingyan propped up her chin in boredom and shook her index finger. "Don't tell His Highness yet. He's been very busy recently. Don't let him worry about this kind of thing." Su Yi nodded. "Then what should we do with Lu Bai?" "Keep him. I have a use for him." Her eyes darkened. She didn't think that the person behind this would be Xiao Ran. Every time he met her and Big Ice Cube, he was always gentle and cute. One day, he stood on the opposite side of them and cut off all familial ties. He was no longer gentle and kind. She pressed down the corners of her mouth and showed a touch of sadness. The beautiful memories of the past could only be buried in the depths of her mind. At this time, Xiao Su opened the curtain and walked in. Jean Exen and the others tactfully retreated. "I heard that you caught someone today?" Sitting down beside her, Xiao Su looked at her with a faint smile. There was no questioning or suspicion in his eyes, only honest trust. Chu Qingyan smiled and nodded without hesitation. "The source of the rumors." Xiao Su's lips curved up with a faint smile. "You can deal with it. I won't interfere." Chu Qingyan smiled brightly. One didn't ask, the other didn't say, but they trusted each other completely. "Why are you suddenly here? Didn't Huoling say that you had something urgent to deal with?" Chu Qingyan poured him a glass of water and tilted her head. The bet with the generals of the army had spread like wildfire in the army. Although Big Ice Cube didn't care, she insisted on sleeping in a tent to avoid gossip. Of course, in order to make Big Ice Cube compromise, she paid a big price. Thinking about it now, she still felt hot all over. If I have to do everything personally in the army, then what's the use of having them? Xiao Su's voice suddenly became a little cold. Since the little fellow admitted that she was a woman dressed as a man, those old generals seemed to have made up their minds to pester him, trying to make him busy and unable to find her again. In the end, they were all quietly dealt with by him. However, there was no need to let the little fellow know about these things. She could hear the anger in Big Ice Cube's voice. It wasn't hard for her to guess that it had something to do with her. However, since Big Ice Cube didn't say anything, she didn't need to ask. If he wanted her to know, he would tell her. Chu Qingyan nodded in agreement. You're right. The battlefield is constantly changing. Even if you've made arrangements, there will be times when you'll need them to adapt to the situation. You're right. You're a war god, but you're not a god. They need their own abilities. Big Ice Cube's men were all not bad, and each of them had experienced hundreds of battles. However, when there was a strong backer, they would subconsciously rely on him. In fact, this was not good for the army. Seeing that the little fellow could understand the meaning of his words, Xiao Su felt a burst of joy in his heart. He raised his hand and pinched the soft flesh on her face. It was very smooth to the touch. About tomorrow's competition, do you have any questions? Big Ice Cube, are you opening the back door for me to cheat? She deliberately twisted his meaning and blinked at him. If you want to understand it that way, it's more or less the same. Xiao Su didn't feel that there was anything wrong with betraying his subordinates. Anyway, no matter how big the world was, it couldn't compare to the person in his arms. Chu Qingyan rolled her eyes at Jiang, hugging just because he didn't like it. Xiao Su smiled. Sometimes, don't take fairness too seriously. How do you know that they didn't find someone else to ask about your ability? Chu Qingyan narrowed her eyes. Then, Big Ice Cube, please tell me more about their characteristics. What's in it for me? He lowered his head and looked at her, a deep smile in his eyes. Between the two of them, there was only a layer of mask, and their lips were just a hair's breadth away from touching. What do you think? She blushed and her heart raced, but she pretended to be calm. Xiao Su's lips hooked up, revealing a mysterious smile. In the middle of the night, a black shadow appeared in her tent. Looking at those eyes that were more beautiful than the stars, Chu Qingyan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What happened to the promised rest separately? She only heard the breath by her ear. This king is here to reap the benefits. Before she could react, she had already been pushed onto the bed. The night passed in silence. At daybreak, the entire army camp was especially lively, waiting for the competition at noon. During lunch, Mr. Chu, Mrs. Chu, and the others sat around the table and looked nervously at the main character of the day. Unfortunately, the main character didn't take himself seriously and focused on eating. From time to time, he would even feed the 4 animals at his feet. Kai, you'll be competing in a while. Are you confident? Mother Chu asked worriedly. Mother, I don't have the ability to do that. How would I dare to take on that porcelain task? Chu Qingyan replied with a smile. Although she said that, Mother Chu was still worried. Father Chu suddenly patted the back of his wife's hand and comforted her. Dan Yang, don't worry. Kai has my heroic spirit back in the day. She'll definitely beat those people to a pulp. Moreover, I'll cheer for her. When Mother Chu heard this, she didn't want to burden her daughter and lowered her head to eat. Xining was serving the dishes at the side. She pursed her lips as if she was being bullied. Master, are you really going to fight 1 against 3? Why don't we send the Howling Cheese men up? I believe they are also first-class experts. Chu Qingyan had just finished eating and put down the bowl. She wiped her mouth and raised her brows at her little servant. What? You have confidence in Jean Xin, but not in me. You're not even married yet, but you're already siding with outsiders? When Xining heard this, she couldn't care less about what she had just asked. She glanced at Jean Xin, who was looking at her, and immediately covered her blushing cheeks. She stomped her feet at her master. Master, what nonsense are you saying? Then she ran out like a wisp of smoke. Chu Qingyan pursed her lips and couldn't help but laugh. Then, she met the faint smile in Big Ice Cube's eyes. The competition would begin in an hour. Chu Qingyan planned to rest and recharge her energy for a while, but she was stopped by her father. Kai Kai, father believes in you. When the time comes, father will stand at the side and cheer for you. I'll definitely drown out those brats' voices. Haha, I knew father is the best. Chu Qingyan grinned at her father. She was touched by his encouragement, but she didn't take his solemn last sentence to heart. When she saw her father's lineup, she didn't know whether to cry or laugh. Noon arrived. Everyone had already arrived at the competition venue, the training grounds. I didn't expect you to really dare to come. Wu Lin saw Chu Qingyan appear and sneered coldly. Chu Qingyan shrugged. I didn't expect General Wu to also dare to come. An eye for an eye, who didn't know how to return an eye for an eye? Wu Lin snorted. Only ignorant children would argue with each other. General Wu is right. She continued to reply indifferently. Wu Lin choked and left after saying, we'll see who's the real deal in the competition. Chu Qingyan didn't take him seriously at all. She smiled faintly and walked towards the competition stage. The sun hung high in the sky. The noisy training grounds were filled with soldiers. They had never seen Chu Qingyan before. At this moment, they only felt that the charming youth in red was so eye-catching. Chapter 1401. The competition stage was already surrounded by people. Chu Qingyan glanced around and saw that the generals she saw in the tent 2 days ago were all present. There were also some unfamiliar faces, but they all looked at her with unkind eyes. She never expected these people who lived in a patriarchal society to respect others, so she indifferently looked away and walked towards the small path that the crowd made for her. She can win with just her strength? Isn't that a joke? Don't look down on her. She once led a team to defeat the Prince of Nansong. That was the soldier's achievement. What does it have to do with her? I'll wait to see her crying and begging for mercy later. Chu Qingyan turned a deaf ear to these gossips. Jean Xian and the others who followed beside her silently, completely ignoring these people. When the time came, they wouldn't even have time to cry. There was no need to argue with them now. Is everyone here? Xiao Su sat on the judging platform. After his smiling gaze landed on the little fellow, he quickly glanced over at the others. Gao Hao stood up as the judge. Reporting to your highness, everyone is here. Chu Qingyan looked at the 3 people who stood up and couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. The opponent for the first round was a young general. It was the young general who was jumping around beside Hua Ling and Turin when Chu Qingyan returned a few days ago. Hua Ling whispered in her ear, this person is Hua Yuan. His archery skills are superb. He can shoot a willow leaf from 100 steps away. People call him a divine archer. Chu Qingyan smiled. Big Ice Cube still had such an expert by his side. It was really a crouching tiger and hidden dragon. She nodded, indicating that she understood. After Gao Hao ordered people to prepare the target, he had the 2 people stand behind the yellow line. Chu Qingyan picked up the bow on the table and was adjusting it when suddenly, a burst of noise came from not far away. Go Kai Kai! Kai Kai is invincible! Master's divine archery is unparalleled, invincible under the heavens. Chu Qingyan stiffened her neck and looked over. She had almost broken the bowstring in that fight. She saw her father wearing a cone-shaped headgear made of paper and holding colorful ribbons in his hand. He was directing the cheerleading team. The members of the cheerleading team were Glutinous Rice Ball, Su Yi, and the others. At this time, they were all expressionlessly wearing the same colorful headgear as their father. Then, they swayed left and right while shouting slogans. Seeing their master's gaze, the group of people looked back at her helplessly. It was the old man who held them back, otherwise, they really didn't want to embarrass their master. One could only imagine how magnificent the scene of 3 snow wolves and more than 10 howling riders was. The crowd was shocked by this scene, and their gazes kept darting between Chu Qingyan and this group of people. Then, some people were dissatisfied with their noise and wanted to chase Father Chu and the others out. However, Snowflake Cake and the other 2 squatting on both sides slowly bared their fangs at the newcomers, and the crowd immediately dismissed the idea of going against them. Mr. Chu twisted his waist and waved his ribbon. He cast a smug look at his daughter and shouted even louder. Mr. Chu, Kai Kai. Su Yi and the others, invincible. Mr. Chu, Kai Kai. Su Yi and the others, victory. Chu Qingyan swallowed her saliva and turned around amidst the cheers. Then she immediately picked up the arrow and took a deep breath. No, she had to end the competition as soon as possible. Originally, she had planned to take her time to deal with this Hua Yuan, but now it seemed that she had to do it quickly. Just like everyone else, Hua Yuan was shocked by Father Chu's display of power. Before he could regain his senses, someone cried out, "Triple shot, bullseye." As soon as this was said, everyone immediately turned around and saw that Chu Qingyan's target had 3 arrows in the bullseye. At this time, she pulled the bowstring and released the 3 arrows. The 3 arrows flew through the air and steadily pierced the bullseye in the blink of an eye. In the noisy scene, only Mr. Chu and the others were left cheering even harder. Everyone else was stunned and their jaws were about to drop. This was the first time they had seen someone shoot 3 consecutive shots, and with such accuracy. Hua Yuan, who was standing at the side, was completely frozen. He had completely forgotten to shoot an arrow because he had seen an even more frightening scene. There were only 4 arrows left. Chu Qingyan found it troublesome, so she took them all and loaded them all. That's scary. She's going to shoot 4 consecutive shots? Someone exclaimed. However, before he could finish speaking, Chu Qingyan had already released the bowstring. All 3 arrows hit the bullseye. One of them penetrated the bullseye and the other pierced the bullseye. The scene was so silent that one could hear a pin drop. Is she still human? This is the first time I've seen someone so strong. That's so scary. Pinch me. Are you dreaming? While everyone was still in a daze, Chu Qingyan's father and the others burst out in cheers, breaking the silence of the scene. In an instant, everyone regained their senses and looked at Chu Qingyan in shock. It was as if she had 3 heads and 6 arms. Chu Qingyan threw the bow to the guard next to her. She wasn't affected by the crowd's cheers. She turned to the petrified Hua Yuan and smiled politely. Your turn. Hua Yuan looked at the youth who was smiling like a spring breeze but was so terrifying. He swallowed his saliva and said, Hua Yuan admits defeat. He could guarantee that he would hit the bullseye every 10 times, but this person's strong archery skills made him admit defeat. Even if both of them hit the bullseye, he had to admit that in everyone's eyes, her archery skills were superior. Rather than wasting time competing, he might as well admit defeat. Chu Qingyan saw his sincere expression and couldn't help but smile. It seemed that although this archery genius was unyielding, he wasn't arrogant. Very good, she could let the ice cube nurture him more in the future. Gao Hao and the other generals finally regained their senses. Their gaze landed on Chu Qingyan as if they were looking at a monster. This person was so strong. Wu Lin and the others who disliked her stopped underestimating her. They no longer saw her as a weak girl, but as an opponent. Meanwhile, Hong Jianhua stroked his beard thoughtfully. Xiao Su wasn't surprised at the result of this competition at all. He waved his hand and ordered people to prepare for the second round. There was a quarter of an hour to rest. At this moment, Chu Qingyan walked to the ice cube and whispered, Can you ask Father and the others to withdraw? It was so lively that she wanted to dig a hole and hide in it. Xiao Su's eyes shone with a smile. Father-in-law has good intentions. As a son-in-law, I can't stop him. Chu Qingyan glared at him in annoyance. Then, under the referee's call, she leaped onto the arena. It was built temporarily, but it was very sturdy. Wu Lin was stopped by Hong Jianhua and was explaining something to him. He hadn't stepped onto the arena yet. Chu Qingyan wasn't in a hurry. She stood there elegantly with her hands behind her back. At the same time, Father Chu's cheerleaders had already occupied one side. They were cheering loudly and even singing a song. 1, 2, quick, quick, 1, 2, 3, quick, 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 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we've waited so long. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, we've waited so long. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, we've waited so long. Wax-scored skin, watermelon skin, don't be shameless. Chu Qingyan's mouth twitched. This competition was too long. She had to end it quickly. Chapter 1402. Hua Ling stood beside his master and laughed. This subordinate didn't expect the old master to be so talented. Xiao Su smiled. Interesting. When Wu Lin heard the repeated cheers, he couldn't help but jump onto the martial arts stage with a dark face. Chu Qingyan looked at Wu Lin's face that was darker than the bottom of a pot and smiled. General Wu, please. Although Wu Lin had a straightforward personality, he wasn't reckless. He had seen Chu Qingyan hit all 10 arrows in 3 tries and he didn't dare to look down on her. Especially after Hong Jianjun reminded him not to underestimate his opponent, he became even more cautious. Please. Wu Lin cupped his fist and returned the greeting. Wu Lin was dressed in short clothes that made it easier for him to move his limbs. He stood there, 8 feet tall and had a strong body. One could feel the tension of his muscles under his clothes. On the other hand, Chu Qingyan was dressed normally. Her pure white clothes were covered with a red veil, which made her snow-white skin and red lips look even more gorgeous. However, her long hair was tied up high and she had a faint smile on her face. Her eyes were gentle and she looked more like a young master who didn't know much about the world. It was as if she wasn't here to compete, but to go sightseeing. Comparing the two, it was as if the outcome was already decided. However, when Wu Lin attacked and she easily dodged, the crowd held their breaths. They didn't dare to look down on this girl anymore. How could they still dare to say that she was an idiot after seeing her archery skills? Chu Qingyan didn't pay attention to the others. Her eyes were fixed on Wu Lin in front of her. She saw that his breathing was calm and his standing posture showed that his martial arts weren't weak. Moreover, he had been leading troops in battle for more than 10 years. He had experienced hundreds of battles and his strength couldn't be underestimated. After exchanging a few blows, Wu Lin coldly looked at her. He couldn't help but admit that his internal energy wasn't as good as hers, but he had the upper hand in terms of strength. Although her martial arts were strong, she was still a girl. As long as he held her back and she weakened, he would be able to win. This was what General Hong had told him. At this time, the crowd outside the field saw that the two of them were locked in a fierce battle. They were also influenced by the Chu clan's cheerleaders, and they all joined in to cheer for them. In an instant, the atmosphere became very lively. After exchanging more than 50 moves with Wu Lin, Chu Qingyan was still at ease. She had already seen through Wu Lin's plan, but she didn't finish him off immediately. At least, she had to leave some face for Ice Cube. This person was his valiant general, and she couldn't lose too badly. After understanding this person's ability, Chu Qingyan suddenly changed her gentle fighting style and punched towards Wu Lin's face. Wu Lin immediately stretched out his hand to block, but he soon realized that this was just a feint. Her real purpose was, Chu Qingyan curled her lips into a smile. Her other hand quickly struck towards his chest. With a roundhouse kick, Wu Lin was like a kite with a broken string. He was easily kicked off the stage by her. This was terrifying. This Wu Lin was at least 200 pounds, and he was sent flying by her kick just like that. The crowd took a few steps back. This person was too terrifying. She was simply a smiling tiger. Chu Qingyan patted her clothes and smoothed out the wrinkles caused by the fight. Then she slowly walked to the side of the stage and looked down at Wu Lin, who was lying on the ground. She smiled humbly and politely and cupped her hands. Thank you for letting me win. Wu Lin didn't expect that he would be beaten by a woman to the point where he couldn't even defend himself. He had lost all his face, but he still stood up and swept away the contempt he had for her. He cupped his hands in shame and said, "Thank you for showing mercy." Although he was injured, it was all superficial. Her boxing skills were far above his, and it would be easy for her to finish him off. However, she didn't. Such a magnanimous person who didn't use her power to avenge private grudges. When he thought of what he had done to her before, he couldn't help but feel ashamed. "You're welcome." Chu Qingyan smiled faintly. Of course, she wouldn't injure or cripple him. Needless to say, Big Ice Cube's side was lacking in talents. Moreover, she had to maintain good relations with her colleagues. Otherwise, what if they were to cause trouble for her? She only took less than half an incense to finish the second round. This person's strength was terrifying. While everyone was still shocked that she had defeated the strongest man in their army, the Chu clan's cheerleaders came online again. Once Kai Kai makes a move, you'll know whether she's strong or not. Her boxing skills are unparalleled in the world. Chu Qingyan was just about to leave the stage gracefully when she heard this slogan. Her leg tilted and she almost fell to the ground. The third round of the competition began very quickly. Marching and setting up formations was a simulation of a real battlefield. The two sides faced off to see who had the stronger combat ability. During this period, Chu Qingyan and Hong Jianhua each picked 500 soldiers from the army. Then, using the sand table as the battlefield, the two planned on the sand table while the soldiers fought on the training ground. Chu Qingyan walked to the place where the army gathered and chose the 500 people under Hua Yuan. Then, she walked back to the sand table and sat down. Hong Jianhua was originally worried that she would choose from the people he brought, because Jin Xin and the others were all experts. They could at least fight 1 against 10. If they really went on the field, his people wouldn't be enough for them to kill. Seeing that she had finished choosing, he directly chose the people under his banner. Just now, His Highness had sent a message to him to use his own people. Doing so would make people think that he was bullying others. He was a proud person, but military orders were difficult to follow. The sand table was Hong Jianhua's strength. As soon as he sat down, his aura suddenly changed. He was calm and steady, making people feel intimidated. Then I'll start first. Chu Qingyan waved a paper fan in one hand and a small flag in the other. She was very leisurely and looked more like a hedonistic sun than before, even though her real identity was a woman. She placed the small flag on the left side of the opponent's army and smiled. The first team, take 100 people and attack directly from the left. On the other side of the sand table, Hong Jianhua quickly responded. Xiao Li, take 80 people with shields to defend and counterattack. Hong Sheng, take 50 archers to shoot forward. The two of them each occupied a corner of the high platform and didn't interfere with each other. No one knew what order the other gave. They could only see the reactions of their 500 soldiers. The height of the high platform was just enough to see the battle below clearly. The second team, take 100 soldiers to cover with shields. The third team, take 100 cavalry to flank from the right. No matter what move Chu Qingyan used, the opponent's defense was very good. Seeing that her people were blocked by the opponent with a small number of people, Chu Qingyan couldn't help but nod. This General Hong was indeed an expert. But this way, she could play a little longer. In the past, she only had the big ice cube to accompany her. She was always beaten to a pulp. This time she could fight back. After the two of them fought for a few rounds, Hong Jianhua suddenly felt a little lost. This person's fighting style was basically not according to the rules. His attitude was the same as hers. He did whatever he wanted as if there was no strategy at all. He just let the soldiers attack wherever he wanted, just like a newbie. Hong Jianhua thought, could it be that this person didn't know how to fight at all? Because he had won 2 rounds, he had already won the bet, so he didn't care about the success or failure of this round. He looked suspiciously at the corner covered by the curtain and suddenly had a plan in his heart. Chapter 1403. Xiao Su sat in the middle of the stage with a stack of papers beside his hand. On the papers were the orders given by the referee. As more and more papers appeared, the battle below became more and more intense. Sitting on both sides were high-ranking military officers. They took the papers and looked at the battle below. Many of them revealed the same confused expression as Hong Jianhua. Does this person not know how to fight? It seems like she's sending people to their deaths. The moment Lu Weiyun spoke, everyone agreed. Because Chu Qingyan had revealed her skills in the previous 2 battles, many people had a whole new level of respect for her. No one dared to look down on her anymore. But when they were prepared for battle, she used a disorderly marching formation. This made them deeply suspect that they had overestimated her before. Xiao Su glanced at the high-ranking military officers on both sides and curled his lips subtly. Then he focused on the battle below. Many soldiers were taken off the stage. This was only a drill and not a real battle. So, the soldiers who went on stage wrapped their weapons in cloth. This way, they could ensure that they would not injure their opponents. But if they were hit in a vital point, they would have to leave the stage, indicating that they had died in battle. Comparing the two sides, Chu Qingyan's side had more and more people left the stage. The battle was one-sided, but her expression was still calm. She was not disturbed because of this. Hong Jianhua glanced at the battlefield. He had only lost 100 soldiers, but the other side had lost twice as many men. He believed that at this speed, he would be able to obtain a complete victory in less than an hour. When she saw the change in the battle below, she knew the other side's plan. She chuckled and was not in a hurry to reel in the net. She continued to use her diversion tactic. After an hour, Hong Jianhua discovered that his men were actually unable to take down all of her men. A trace of surprise flashed through his eyes and he immediately looked at the battlefield. He saw that his men were surrounding and attacking Chu Qingyan's men. But her men did not fall, while his men fell one after another. He could not help but suck in a breath. What the hell is going on? While Hong Jianhua was still in shock, the two rows of generals on either side of Xiao Su also stood up, because the situation had suddenly become one-sided, and the prairie was ablaze with lightning speed. Xiao Su sipped his tea and glanced at the generals beside him. His gaze was as calm as snow. It was time to let these subordinates see that military tactics were not so inflexible. Every time, they could find traces in military books. Only by using them flexibly and mastering them, and then catching them off guard, would they be able to laugh proudly in the end. Glancing at the battlefield, Chu Qingyan evaluated the troops on both sides and calculated the time. When she felt that it was about time, she stuck the small flag in her hand into the enemy's territory without hesitation and said, "Reel in the net." Soon, the side that was still being beaten up suddenly pounced on the opponent like a flood dragon, crushing the opponent's life in a crushing manner. How could this be? Weren't those people exhausted just now? Why do they seem to have changed their appearances? Wu Lin exclaimed, speaking the thoughts in Hong Jianhua's heart. They had clearly seen Chu Qingyan's people being exhausted, but now, they were all ferocious like tigers, beating their opponents to the point of retreating. That's not right. Did you guys notice that little General Chu did not use those 200 people at all? Instead, they were placed at the side. Because the 300 people in front of her were fighting, we had neglected them. Jing Guangwei, who had participated in the Battle of the Southern Heavens with Chu Qingyan, looked at the battlefield below, and his eyes suddenly lit up. Because he was too shocked, the way he addressed Chu Qingyan was still stuck in the past. If General Jing did not mention it, we would not have noticed that those 200 people had not moved at all. That is to say, little General Chu used 300 people to fight against General Hong's 500 people? Fang Lu, who had been watching from the side, could not help but interrupt. He had always stood on Chu Qingyan's side. Even though he knew that she was a girl, he did not reject her, because he knew that she was his master's helper. Therefore, he would only admire her, and not have the same intense reaction as the others. Rather than saying that she was fighting, it was more like she was dragging them down. Xiao Su, who had been silent all this time, slowly opened his mouth to remind them. It seemed that these people had already started to reflect. Not bad. With His Highness' reminder, everyone finally broke their original train of thought. Thinking back to Chu Qingyan's plan from the beginning to the end, their faces became more and more shocked. From the beginning, this person had used an unmethodical method to exhaust the strength of General Hong's side. However, they saw it as her not knowing how to fight and seeking her own death. However, looking at it from another perspective, it was precisely because she did not follow the routine that she lowered the opponent's guard, causing them to step into her trap step by step. She dragged down 500 people and left 200 people to recharge. When the opponent was exhausted, she instantly attacked. So what if the opponent had the advantage in numbers? Didn't they still suffer a counterattack? When they thought it through, the sound of gongs and drums suddenly rang out. Everyone's faces changed. It was over? So fast? The curtain on one side was pulled down, revealing Hong Jianhua's pale face covered in sweat. He had lost. He had lost. There had never been a time when he had lost so unexpectedly. On the other side, the youth slowly walked out while fanning himself. Although he was gorgeous, No one dared to look down on him anymore. They felt that he was weaker than a man. Instead, he made people feel fearful. How was this a rabbit? This was clearly a snow wolf. Killing without spilling blood. The people below began to announce, General Hong's soldiers have lost 479 people, only 21 people are left. Miss Chu's soldiers have died. That person seemed to have suddenly become stuck, so shocked that he could not complete a sentence. Old Lu, what are you stammering for? Hurry up and say it. Some impatient people impatiently urged. Old Lu took a deep breath, and then loudly said, General Chu's soldiers have lost 56 people, only 444 people are left. For a moment, there was a deathly silence. They could not believe what they had heard. Hong Jianhua staggered out, both hands holding the railing as he said in disbelief, How is this possible? She used so many people to drag down my people, how can there be so many people left? Old Lu helplessly pointed at the soldiers behind him. This is the truth. I also dare not believe it. At this moment, the soldiers who were still alive were standing there, full of energy, while the soldiers who were dead stood on the other side. There were hundreds and dozens of people. At a glance, it was incomparably clear. I simply dare not believe my eyes. How can this be? Someone raised this question. Instantly, everyone turned to look at the elegant youth who walked out from behind the curtain, eyes full of questions. Chu Qingyan, who had attracted everyone's attention, did not notice at all. At this moment, she was looking at the Chu clan's cheerleaders who had run to the center of the practice field and were dancing wildly. Being invincible is so lonely. Being invincible is so empty. Chu Qingyan covered her face. She really did not know these people. Chapter 1404. Best of 3, Chu Qingyan won. When Gao Hao made the announcement, no one had any objections. Because the woman they had not taken seriously at all had used her valiant ability to crush their 3 generals without any pressure. No one suspected her of using any fancy tricks. She was so strong that it made people fearful. Everyone no longer looked at her with disdain and doubt. When all the generals gathered on the high platform, Chu Qingyan was greeted with gazes of admiration, shame, and shame. And Hong Jianhua, who had already accepted the fact that he had lost, pushed aside the crowd and impatiently walked in front of Chu Qingyan. Jin Exen thought that this person was going to renege on his loss and immediately stood in front of his master. Hong Jianhua was anxious and wanted to reprimand Jin Exen and leave. But he felt a chill run down his spine, as if a basin of cold water had been poured over him. He turned his head and met his lord's cold gaze. He couldn't help but tremble. Only then did he realize that his actions had caused a misunderstanding. He was not a person who could not accept defeat. He immediately cupped his hands and explained to Chu Qingyan, This general has no other intentions. I just want to ask young General Chu about the question of the number of casualties. This general is very puzzled. Why are there so many people left? This was not only Hong Jianhua's question, but also the question of everyone present. They all turned to look at Chu Qingyan, thirsting for knowledge, wanting to know the answer. When General Hong had been defeated, they had seen Chu Qingyan's tactics. While they were shocked and impressed, they also felt fear. She had actually used the lives of 300 soldiers as a stake. It was very bold and very vicious. If she had several times more people under her control and several times more enemies, wouldn't the price she had to pay be even greater? But the result was reversed. There were so many people who had survived. It was beyond imagination, and they had even won. Chu Qingyan called out to Jin Exen. Jin Exen understood and retreated behind her, while she looked at Hong Jianhua with a faint smile. Military strength is the foundation of war. This Chu is not a cruel person who only wants to win without caring about the lives of the soldiers. Unless there is no other choice, I will not use a strategy that harms 1,000 of the enemy and 800 of my own men. Chu Qingyan's words were clear. Because she was on the high platform and because she did not suppress her voice, it spread to every corner of the platform. The soldiers gathered around the high platform heard it clearly. When they saw her move just now, Everyone was worried that if she stayed in the army, she would become a cold-blooded and ruthless leader. If she sacrificed them for victory, that would be too terrifying. At this time, they couldn't help but be comforted. They felt that as a superior, it was already very difficult for her to think for them. They admired her even more. Chu Qingyan's words were meant for the people below the platform to hear. She was afraid that in the eyes of the army, she would become the Azura from hell. Chu Qingyan continued to explain to Hong Jianhua with a smile. As for why there are so many people left behind, it is because this Chu had already instructed them before going to the battlefield. Their goal is to exhaust your strength and make you tired. As long as this goal is achieved, it is fine. There is no need to fight to the death. At the critical moment, it is more important to save your lives. If you are injured, you can play dead. That is why we conserve our strength. There is no such thing as war. She did not find it embarrassing at all to let the soldiers play dead. In the face of life and death, what was face and dignity? Chu Qingyan's words refreshed the world-view of the soldiers present. The people on the platform were all experts in war and were not people who stuck to the rules. After hearing her words, it was as if their conception and governing vessels had been opened, and they suddenly had a new understanding of military formations. War was the way of deception. Xiao Su glanced at the enlightened expressions of his subordinates and slowly curved his lips. The little fellow had won 2 rounds in a row, so the outcome was already decided. There was no need for a 3rd round, but he had always felt that the more battles they fought, the more mediocre the style of his generals became. In the long run, there were only disadvantages and no advantages. He needed someone to break the situation and bring in a new source of power. The little fellow was a good candidate. And the little fellow also wanted to test the methods of his subordinates. The 2 of them had the same idea and continued to compete in the 3rd round. The result was just what he wanted. That graceful figure entered his sight and a faint smile flashed across Shen Mo's eyes. He had not misjudged her. Good. Young General Chu is indeed brave and resourceful. This general apologizes for his previous rudeness. Hong Jianhua stepped forward and bowed with his hands clasped in front. With Hong Jianhua as an example, the rest of the people immediately cupped their hands and apologized. Young General Chu, please forgive us for our previous offense. Young General Chu, please forgive us. Now everyone had changed the way they addressed her. The people who came from the army were all straightforward. They were not like the civil officials who were scheming. They said whatever was on their mind. Right was right, wrong was wrong, and they were not pretentious. Previously, when they heard the rumors, they thought that this woman was Hu Mei. This time, when they came to help the prince, they were already prepared to break off relations with the royal family. If they were to be affected because of this person, then wouldn't they be banging their heads against a wall? However, they did not expect that this person was not only not a burden, but also a help to Lord. Whether it was strength or intelligence, she was far above them. How could they care about whether she was a man or a woman? At this critical moment, 1 more talent meant 1 more strength, and 1 more strength meant 1 more chance of winning. When a person reached such a level of strength, in their eyes, it was already beyond gender. And this was beyond Chu Qingyan's expectations. She originally only wanted to stay in the army in this way so that no one would object and not make things difficult for Big Ice Block. But she opened the folding fan to cover the smile on her face. It was an unexpected gain. Everyone, there is no need to blame yourselves. If it were me, I would do the same. I am very happy that you can recognize my ability. This Chu is honored. Chu Qingyan did not put on airs. In the future, they would all be her colleagues. It was very important to have a good relationship in the office. Only by being harmonious could they go further. She had such a powerful ability, yet she was humble and gentle. This made everyone feel relieved, and they immediately started chatting with her. The scene became lively all of a sudden. After a while, after enjoying the happy scene, Xiao Su suddenly spoke. The competition is over, and the results are out. This matter has come to an end. However, a country has its laws, and an army has its rules. Since little General Chu had disguised herself as a man to participate in the Battle of the Southern Heavens, this prince should give you an explanation while everyone is here. When these words fell, everyone was surprised and looked at each other. Gao Hao stood up. Lord, let's just forget about this matter. Young General Chu has won many battles for the Sichuan. Her ability is outstanding. Now that we are in need of people, we can let bygones be bygones. Xiao Su raised his hand to stop him from speaking. He calmly looked at the person surrounded by the generals and said indifferently, Ah Yen, what are you going to do? Chapter 1405. Chu Qingyan raised her head and met those deep eyes. Under the inexplicable and nervous gazes of Jean Exin and the others, she slowly revealed a row of neat little teeth. Listen to your highness. Those eyes were calm and no one could guess what he was thinking. They only heard him order, tie her up. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone gasped. This woman had disguised herself as a man to sneak into the army camp and fight with the army. If she was really investigated, even beheading in public would not be enough to offset her crime. She might even implicate her family, and at least 9 generations of her family would be executed. They did not understand why Lord would choose to investigate Chu Qingyan's crime at this time. Although this was in line with Lord's ruthless style, they were no longer so angry about her disguising herself as a man. Looking at Chu Qingyan tied up by a thick rope, everyone wanted to say something, but they were intimidated by Lord's pressure and stopped. However, their Lord had already stood up from the main seat and walked to the edge of the high platform. Because they did not deliberately lower their voices, the people below had already heard their words. At this time, Xiao Su's movements slowly moved to the front of the high platform. In other words, the army of 100,000 had unknowingly gathered below the high platform. Chu Qingyan walked to his side under the signal of the soldiers behind her and looked down at the soldiers below with him. Because she had used less than 4 hours to finish the 3 rounds of competition, the sun was very bright and dazzling at this time. She narrowed her eyes and looked at the strange and surprised faces. Although she did not know what the people beside her wanted to do, her heart was calm. Xiao Su raised his hand and the noise instantly disappeared. The 100,000 pairs of eyes below looked at him in reverence. He pointed to the person beside him and said in a deep voice, Recently, there has been a rumor in the army. What it is about, everyone knows in their hearts, so this king will not say much. The person standing beside this king is the main character that you are talking about. That's right, she is a woman. She has disguised herself to stay by this king's side and has once led the army into battle. However, the army has its rules and women are not allowed to enter the army. Not to mention, pretending to be a man is an additional crime. The army should be strictly governed, otherwise it will be hard to convince the people. Without rules, nothing can be accomplished. Today, this king will give everyone an explanation in front of everyone. These words were clearly to punish Chu Qingyan. When Jean Xan, Su Yi and the others saw this, they couldn't help placing their hands on their waists. As long as Xiao Su dared to touch their master, they would definitely pull out their swords and fight to the death. Because their master was Chu Qingyan, not him. Even if master had a close relationship with him, when it came to a choice, they would only stand by master's side and would only listen to him. On the side, Hua Ling's expression changed when he saw this. He immediately pressed down on the sword in Jean Xian's hand and glared at him. What are you doing? Why aren't you making them put away their weapons? Hua Ling, we will not let anyone hurt master. Jean Xan was indifferent as he coldly looked at him. Hua Ling was angry. Anyone in this world can hurt the little princess, but only my master will not. Don't be impulsive and believe in my master. Jean Xan looked at his master who still had a relaxed expression. After a moment of silence, he raised his hand to have the others stop. If something happened, master would naturally call them. Hua Ling gave a sigh of relief when he saw this. But when he turned to look at master's tall and straight back, he really could not understand what his master was thinking right now. Xiao Su took in all the expressions of the people below, but he did not give them time to react. His eyes darkened as he raised his voice and slowly spoke in a voice that everyone could hear. This time, this king will not be biased, but before condemning them, this king must introduce them to you all due to your misunderstanding of this person's identity. This woman is called Chu Yan. Her real name is Chu Qingyan. She is the princess consort that this king has yet to marry, as decreed by the retired emperor and personally bestowed by the emperor emeritus. When these words came out, everyone was in an uproar. Even the group of generals beside Xiao Su all changed expressions. When they heard the rumors, they thought it was a seductive woman who had popped out of nowhere. They never thought she would have this kind of identity. They felt even more guilty and blamed themselves than before. It was them who had gauged the heart of a gentleman with the yardstick of a villain. Xiao Su looked at everyone's reaction and his expression did not change. He continued, "At that time, the Battle of Southern Song had begun. The situation was dangerous and dozens of cities had fallen. There were very few people at this king's side that could be used. It was Chu Qingyan who volunteered to lead the army to resist the enemy and save the people from the fire and water. So there was this kind of story behind it. Rumors were really harmful. At this time, they looked at Chu Qingyan on the stage. She was clearly elegant and refined with a gentle and kind appearance. How could someone say she was a seductive beauty? The person who spread this rumor should be punished with death." However, Xiao Su did not give them time to react. His tone changed as he said in a deep voice, "However, this is still against the rules and deceived the people and the army. It is a disgrace to everyone's trust in this king, so today, this king will place righteousness before family." Chu Qingyan has committed this crime and should be executed according to the law. When these words came out, there was a moment of dead silence, but it quickly became noisy again. "General, you can't. General, please have mercy." A few days ago, the people who wanted to denounce Chu Qingyan were now anxious and agitated as they pleaded for mercy. Chu Qingyan stood quietly at the side. She originally treated herself as a spectator and did not get involved, but now, she seemed to be affected by everyone's emotions. Her brows moved slightly and she was surprised. She could not help but turn to look at the cold and cheerless big ice cube. Hong Jianhua had already treated Chu Qingyan as one of his own. At this time, he could not help but stand up and say, "General, young General Chu disguised herself as a man at that time as an expedient measure. Special circumstances should be dealt with differently. Moreover, she has made great contributions and saved the people from the fire and water. This general feels that her merits can offset her faults." Wu Lin, Gao Hao, and the others also stood up and cupped their hands to plead. "General, young General Chu is a rare talent. Today, everyone has seen her ability and is full of admiration. If she can stay in the army, it will be like adding wings to a tiger. General, please be lenient with her punishment. General, we should not pursue this matter. Let's forget about it. General." Xiao Su acted as if he did not see everyone pleading for mercy and turned to look at the little fellow. "Do you know your crime?" Hearing this, Chu Qingyan glanced at the people who were looking at her nervously. She smiled and then calmly knelt down in front of the army. Qingyan knows her crime. In order to prevent others from saying that this prince is biased, this prince will personally execute the punishment. Xiao Su pulled out the sword of the guard beside him with a swish. The silver light was dazzling. When he finished speaking, Hong Jianhua immediately knelt down. "General, rules are dead, people are alive. General, please have mercy and spare young General Chu." Gao Hao, Jing Guangwei, and the other generals also knelt down and said in unison, "General, please have mercy and spare young General Chu." Then, there was a sound of kneeling below the stage. 100,000 soldiers shouted in unison, "General, please have mercy and spare young General Chu." Suddenly, the whole world was echoing with this sentence. It was like the sound of a drum and bell, deafening and not dispersing for a long time. Chapter 1406. Chu Qingyan could not keep her calm at this time. She looked at everyone in a daze, not knowing how to react for a while. There were pleas in her ears and soldiers kneeling in front of her. It would be a lie if she said she wasn't moved. However, at this time, the sword in Xiao Su's hand was already above Chu Qingyan's head. But without anyone noticing, he reached out to pinch her cheeks before pulling back. Everyone was anxious. Their gazes were fixed on the sword that was suspended in midair. Their pleas for mercy were like an avalanche that could topple mountains and overturn seas. Jin Xian and the others did not care about Hua Ling and the others' dissuasion as they pulled out their swords to go forward. Chu Qingyan turned to shake her head at them, indicating for them not to act rashly. Jin Xian and the others could only grit their teeth and pull back their weapons before retreating. His eyes swept over the kneeling people and a light flashed in Xiao Su's eyes. He suddenly raised his voice to cover the deafening pleas. This king is not a heartless person. Although Chu Qingyan has made mistakes, her original intentions are good. At the same time, she has done many meritorious deeds, so her merits offset her faults. So, Xiao Su said this as he lifted a strand of her long hair. Then he raised the blade in his hand. I'll cut off your hair in place of your head. Without a sound, the strand of black hair had already fallen into Xian Sei's sleeve. The moment he raised the blade, no one dared to breathe. Only when the blade fell and she was still fine did they dare to breathe. In Chu Qingyan's days, there were cheers that covered the previous one. General is wise. General is wise. Xiao Su personally reached out to untie her and then helped her up. He stood beside her and faced everyone. Yesterday's crimes have all been removed. There will be no more Chu Qingyan disguised as a man in the future. If this king hears anyone talking behind their backs again, they will be dealt with according to military law. As long as Chu Qingyan was not punished, it was fine no matter what. Chu Qingyan turned slightly to look at the person beside her. At first, she did not know what the ice cube was planning. However, after so many years of chemistry and trust in him, she listened to him without any reservations. She did not doubt him at all. Even if he held a knife to her head, she would never change her mind. Until this moment, she couldn't help but smile. He didn't let her down. It turned out that everything he did was to help her clear the obstacles and remove this time bomb. Thinking about it, in the future, no one would offend her because of this matter. This was her big block of ice. How could she not love him? Suddenly, she felt her hand warm as it was wrapped in a large palm. She couldn't help but be stunned. Then, she struggled unnaturally and whispered, "Don't be like this in public. You're the commander-in-chief. It's not good if people see you. It wasn't easy for me to get rid of the suspicion of being a vixen, so don't try to frame me again. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude." Hearing her anxious and helpless voice, Xiao Su slightly curled his lips. Then he looked over the army and released his pressure. His eyes were like torches. When everyone felt this pressure, they couldn't help but slowly fall silent. Soldiers, this king knows that you have followed this king with great ambitions, so this king will remember this kindness. This king did not want to be enemies with the royal family, but the emperor went too far, killing loyal people and fabricating crimes to put this king to death. This king has endured humiliation for many years, only wanting to protect the country and its people, but the emperor ignored the ambitions of the surrounding countries and used all means to have this king die in the capital. This hatred is hard to dispel. Now there are wolves and tigers everywhere, but we're all bound together for good or ill. This king will share blessings and hardships with you. Xiao Su rarely said these words, but it made the eyes of the soldiers turn red. Many of the generals by Xiao Su's side had followed him to many victories, but because of the emperor's suspicion, in order to suppress them, he didn't give them an equivalent reward for their military exploits. They were sent far away to the border, not to mention being promoted to nobility. This made them angry, but they didn't dare to say anything. Moreover, they had all been promoted by the Lord, so they didn't care much about military exploits. However, in many battles, the Sichuan emperor had embezzled the army's provisions. If the Lord hadn't thought of ways to fill their stomachs, they wouldn't have sacrificed their lives for the country and would have starved to death. They fought for the country and its people, but the Sichuan emperor's actions made them bitterly disappointed. At this moment, the crowd was angry. Xiao Su raised his hand to calm the restless crowd. Then, he took a step forward with the little fellow and said to the crowd in a clear voice, For so many years, this king has been wandering between life and death. If the princess hadn't been by my side to look after me, this king might have already left this world and wouldn't have had the chance to pacify the chaos of the southern blue continent. Thus, this king said to himself, in the first half of my life, I didn't let down the world, I didn't let down the country, and I definitely can't let her down in the future. Chu Qingyan didn't know what he wanted to say, so she quietly listened. However, she had a feeling that something was about to happen. The people below the stage also listened seriously, their gazes landing on the red-clothed youth with black hair. Their expressions were filled with gratitude and admiration. From the help you've given in the past, you can see that the princess is pure and kind, and she values friendship and righteousness. In today's competition, you've all seen the princess's ability. She's brave, intelligent, and capable of taking on great responsibilities. She doesn't lose to a man, so this king announces, from today onwards, she is the army's other Xiao Su. Seeing her is like seeing me. Her orders are this king's orders. No matter when or where, no one is to question them. His words were powerful and didn't allow for any objections. He wanted everyone to know just how important Chu Qingyan was in his life. He wouldn't allow something like this to happen again. He wouldn't allow anyone to hurt her in any way. So today he wanted to show her his might. Seeing her is like seeing me? Chu Qingyan was deeply shocked by his words. Her mind kept replaying those words. She never thought that at this time he would suddenly stand up for her. From now on, no one in the army would dare to bully her. At the same time, she would be given the same amount of power and she would be able to walk freely. She felt the hand holding her slowly tighten. The heat that came from it made her feel at ease. This affection was too heavy. She estimated that she would have to bear it for the rest of her life. When the soldiers heard Xiao Su's words, they all knelt down and shouted in unison. We pledge our lives to follow the general. We pledge our lives to follow the princess. We pledge our lives to follow the general. We pledge our lives to follow the princess. Their voices were like waves, each one louder than the last. From now on, Chu Qingyan's name would be on par with the god of war Xiao Su's. From now on, this pair of lovers would open a new chapter in their Sichuan. When the Chu clan's cheerleaders heard Xiao Su's order to tie Chu Qingyan up, they were all enraged. Just as they were about to make a move to save their mistress, they were calmed down by the earth spirit, who was already prepared. Seeing that the situation had changed, Chu Qingyan's father was overjoyed. He called everyone to the center of the field and began a new round of dancing. General, Yo-Yo. Princess Yo-Yo. When the soldiers saw this, they also joined in happily. They waved their arms and swayed like the Chu family's cheerleaders. General, Yo-Yo. Princess Yo-Yo. So when Chu Qingyan, who was originally very touched, saw the dancing spread to the entire training field, the corner of her mouth twitched. She couldn't help but raise her hand to cover her face. It was really painful to the eyes. However, Father Chu felt that this scale was too eye-catching. He immediately improvised a few more cheering dances. It became even more lively. Chapter 1407. The soldiers below the platform cheered. On the platform, the two of them looked at each other. Looking down from above, Chu Qingyan looked down at the people below. She felt as though her chest was filled with a warm feeling that was slowly fermenting. She felt as though the entire world was beneath her feet. Walking on the road, she seemed to be walking on cotton and was about to float. Xiao Su, who was walking beside her, saw that her brows were full of smiles. His brows unconsciously relaxed and a faint smile hung on the corner of his mouth. The two of them were like a pair bathed in the spring breeze. Even if they were walking on the simple path of the tents, they seemed to be walking on a beautiful and prosperous road. That kind of carefree, elegant, calm, and picturesque scene made people unable to look away. After today's events, the soldiers coming and going saw Chu Qingyan with admiration and respect in their eyes. They no longer treated her as an ordinary girl because ordinary girls did not have her skilled archery skills, terrifying explosive power, and valiant fighting ability. Moreover, Yahweh, who was standing beside her, restrained his aura and was no longer as cold and unapproachable as usual. This was a girl who was so valiant that it made people fearful and admirable. Big Ice Cube, I didn't think that was your goal. While walking, she was in an exceptionally good mood. Not only because she had won the competition and won the respect of the soldiers, but also because of everything he had done for her on the platform. Xiao Su's lips curled up. What else did you think it was? As they spoke, the two of them walked up a small slope. From this angle, they could see all the tents. In the distance, the setting sun had yet to set. It hung on the mountaintop and the afterglow was like silk, twining in the mountain wind. It was dazzling. It was already close to evening. Iron pots had been set up in the open space and people were starting to cook. Not long after, smoke rose in spirals into the air. The soldiers patrolled back and forth in orderly steps. Their voices were covered by the sound of cooking. Not far away, groups of war horses were eating horsegrass. The smell of smoke was strong. If it was another time and role, it would be like a group of nomads on the grassland, leisurely and contented. Chu Qingyan retracted her gaze and turned to look at him. At that time, I didn't have any thoughts because I knew you had your own reasons for doing things. I only needed to believe in you and follow you. Xiao Su's gaze softened because of her words. He reached out his hand and gently rubbed her head. You cooperated very well. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, it was difficult for Xiao Su to give her any hints. But when he spoke, she did not say a word and she went along with him. This made him very proud. His little fellow trusted him very much. When I held the knife to your neck, were you afraid? Chu Qingyan pretended to roll her eyes at him. It's all in the past. Isn't it too late for you to ask me if I was afraid now? Xiao Su chuckled. Don't worry. Why would I hurt you? As he spoke, he reached out and gently pulled her into his embrace. He rested his chin on the top of her head and his fingers tenderly stroked her ink-black hair. Throwing herself into this warm embrace, Chu Qingyan subconsciously grabbed the front of his clothes and pressed her face against his chest, listening to his strong and powerful heartbeat. Of course she knew that in this world, other than her parents, anyone could hurt her. Only he would not. This person, valued her life more than his own. It was also because of this reason that even when his sword was close to her neck, she still believed that he loved her. Why did you do this? She was asking about the matter of him establishing her authority. Xiao Su hugged her waist and leaned against her with a relaxed expression. When he heard this, he did not open his eyes and slowly replied, Didn't you say that you wanted to fight alongside me? So, you naturally have to stand by my side. Because my glory is your glory. Everything I have is everything you have. You deserve everything I have. In the future, I will walk with you on every path. Big Ice Cube is so good to me. She mumbled with a soft voice. It was different from her usual clear voice. It sounded coquettish and coquettish. This voice made Xiao Su's entire body tense up. His hands could not help but tighten as he pulled her into his embrace and buried his head in her shoulder. Then what about you? Although she seemed to have won easily today, she had expended a lot of energy. Smelling the pleasant smell of ink on his body, she was a little sleepy. When she heard his words in her daze, she did not immediately understand. Well, I'm good to you, so politeness demands reciprocity. How do you want to repay me? He patiently explained. If it was in the past, she would not have thought too much about it. But ever since the two of them had incomparably intimate contact, she was very sensitive to these words. She had a bad premonition in her heart that made her scalp tighten. I don't understand. It seems like the food is ready. Let's go eat. At this moment, she chose to play dead. When she finished speaking, she heard a low chuckle by her ear. Before she could recover from his laughter, she heard him speak in a serious tone. I'm indeed a little hungry. She thought that he had let her go, but unexpectedly, his next words made her cheeks turn red. I can't help but want to start eating. Following that, her feet were in the air. She cried out softly and lost her balance. She hurriedly hugged his neck, but he laughed even more heartily. He moved closer to her ear and whispered bewitchingly, Accompany me tonight. Every time he used his handsome male trick, she could not resist. She could not help but bury herself in his embrace and muffled a mosquito-like reply, "Okay." Xiao Su's lips hooked up. Without another word, he directly carried her into the small forest from before. When she revisited the old place, Chu Qingyan had a kind of self-awareness that the evils she brought upon herself were the hardest to bear. However, this was the man she had chosen. How could she bear to see him suffer? The moon hung above the treetops. The night was hazy and the mountain breeze was gentle. It was a beautiful place to talk about love. Although the two masters did not see each other from afternoon to night, the smart ones knew that they should not disturb them. Each of them concentrated on their own matters. 100 li away, there was a group of light cavalry galloping on the road. "How much longer until we arrive?" The leader of the group was dressed in black armor and asked the person beside him. "Fourth Highness, we will arrive in another day." Yen Shi looked into the distance, then retracted his gaze and replied, "Very good. Inform everyone that we will rest during the day and continue our journey tomorrow night." Xiao Ran ordered without hesitation. Yen Shi complied and then turned around to pass on the order to the person behind him. The moon hung in the sky like a hook, illuminating every inch of land. Xiao Ran pursed his lips and his expression was cold. He had brought half of the army to rush through the night and avoided the official roads. He had specifically chosen the roads that were not detailed on the map. This was to prevent others from discovering him. Only by doing things in the dark could he be undetectable. This method had been taught to him by Qingyan. He never thought that there would be a day when he would use it on them. Xiao Ran clamped the horse's belly and held the reins in his hand as he rushed through the mountain path like lightning. Chapter 1408. Inside the tent, the high-ranking officers gathered and sat in rows in an orderly manner, filling the large tent to the brim. At this time, Chu Qingyan was also sitting to the side. Today was her official meeting with everyone. She tried to sit up straight, but after last night, her entire body was sore and weak. She wanted to find a place to lie down and become a softy. Beside her, a certain person who had eaten his fill had a silver mask on his face, but his smiling eyes showed his mood. Even the cold aura that kept people at 1,000 miles away had lessened. The generals who did not know the situation thought that with Wang Fei present, Wang Yi was more human. He was not as cold and hard to get close to as before. It seemed that Wang Fei was right to stay. They wanted to worship her. Chu Qingyan felt everyone's gaze and glanced at him even more exasperatedly. If he had not said that he would not touch her in the future, she would not have allowed him to mess around last night. She knew what he meant. As the commander-in-chief, he carried the lives and trust of tens of thousands of soldiers on his shoulders. How could he indulge in love? But it was because she was soft-hearted that she fell into his trap. Now, even walking was difficult for her. At this time, it was time for a serious discussion. "Where is Xiao Ran's army now?" Xiao Su asked faintly. Jing Guangwei stood up. He was in charge of intelligence gathering. "They started moving in our direction 3 days ago. They will arrive in 4 or 5 days. When Chu Qingyan heard this, she couldn't help but frown. She had heard the news that Xiao Ran was leading an army to chase after the big ice block. Why were they still so far away? Immediately after, Jing Guangwei said, but the messenger mentioned something. He said that it was very strange. The army was not in a hurry at all. It did not seem like they were rushing to war. These words caused everyone present to be puzzled. Someone said, "Could it be that His Highness Fourth Prince and our Lord have deep brotherly ties, so he wants to let him go and does not want to make things difficult for him?" Xiao Su and Chu Qingyan looked at each other and saw the coldness in each other's eyes. How could it be? When he sent people to surround the prison that day, their brotherly ties were broken and could not be mended. Xiao Su tapped on the table and said coldly, "Prepare for war from today onwards." "What does the Lord mean?" Hong Jianhua asked. Xiao Su pursed his lips. "Xiao Ran has used a camouflage technique. He should have brought his men and approached us quickly. What the scouts saw was that he left behind a small force to disguise as an army of 200,000. His goal is to delay us and lower the army's guard. When the time comes, he will be able to catch us off guard and catch us off guard. Everyone was in an uproar. They completely believed in Lord's judgment. At this moment, they were astonished that the quiet and gentle fourth prince actually had such a trick up his sleeves. The Lord is wise. What should we do now? Wu Lin cupped his hands and asked casually. According to my calculations, we will officially meet tomorrow at the earliest. Xiao Su was silent for a while, and then his voice became solemn. Gao Hao, listen to my orders. Jing Guangwei, listen to my orders. Wu Lin, heed my orders. The orders were passed down. The generals who received the orders left the tent one after another. Soon, the tent was much emptier. Chu Qingyan, who was waiting for orders wholeheartedly, did not hear her name until the end. After everyone left, she placed her hands on the table in front of him and asked fiercely, "What about me?" Xiao Su had already expected that she would not be able to sit still. He reached out and patted the back of her hand, comforting her. "Don't worry. I have already transferred Fong Lu to your command. It's just that he has not returned yet. When he comes back, I will let you familiarize yourself with the troops." A certain someone who had been successfully pacified snorted a few times, and then said, "Why did you think of transferring Fong Lu to me?" Xiao Su smiled lightly. The people under him are responsible for more things, whether it is scouting, receiving, or fighting. Having multiple roles suits your style. Moreover, you have worked with him before. The two of you can skip the step of familiarizing yourself with each other. It will be easier for you to get used to each other. Chu Qingyan's eyes lit up when she heard this. When they were recruiting, she suggested that he could choose people with special abilities from everyone and cultivate an elite troop that could be used at any time. She did not expect that not only did the big ice block listen to her, he actually cultivated them. "Are you really giving them all to me?" She could not help but confirm again. Xiao Su raised his hand and rubbed her face in amusement. "Who else should I give them to if not you? You are the one who suggested it. Of course, you are responsible for closing the stall. Moreover, I have the fierce cavalry. I don't have extra energy to manage them. Although you have the fierce cavalry, there are only a few dozen of them. The fierce cavalry has 1,500 people. The number of people is not comparable to the other generals, but each of them has skills that are enough for you to use. Moreover, Fong Lu's ability is not enough to control them. I need you to help me train them and display their true abilities." His little fellow was smart and quick-witted. She knew how to use people. Her mind was full of strange ideas. She did not walk the path of ordinary people. He believed that in the near future, she would definitely bring him a pleasant surprise. He was looking forward to it. "I know you treat me the best. Then I will wait for Fong Lu to come back and meet these people." She laughed mischievously. Her fingers touched her chin, smiling like a fox. Xiao Su naturally knew what she was thinking. He could not help but curve his lips. Only this kind of person could subdue that group of arrogant fellows. Someone came in to report something. Chu Qingyan left first, not wanting to disturb him. The main reason was that she urgently needed to catch up on sleep. 2 dark circles hung around her eyes, making her look like a panda. Just as she walked out, she met her father who was looking at her anxiously. "Kai, where did Snowflake Cake and the others go to play? Father has not seen them for 2 days. Black Impermanence and the others did not play with father. Father is so bored." Father Chu blinked, his face innocent and sincere as he asked her. Originally, there was still Su Yi and the others to play with him. However, ever since the Chu family's cheerleading team was formed, everyone who saw him ran away like a wisp of smoke. They were afraid that they would be caught to sing, dance, and shout slogans. That was more painful than punishment. She smiled mysteriously. "They went to do something. When they come back, I will let them accompany you properly." Father Chu's eyes immediately lit up. "What is it? A secret?" She laughed mischievously. Seeing this, Father Chu did not ask any more. He sighed and said, Kai, father is alone and has no one to accompany him. If you had given birth to a grandson earlier to play with father, it would have been so much easier. But you are all fighting a war. Father will have to wait for God knows how long? Chu Qingyan was stunned. She could not help but recall that the two of them had been in high spirits for the past 2 days. They did not use any contraception, so it should not be so easy for them to fall for it, right? She comforted herself, then comforted her father. You won't be lonely. Daughter will. She wanted to call someone to play with her father, but when she turned around, Jean Xin, Su Yi, and the others immediately retreated. Then they looked at the sky and the ground and did not look at her. She turned around, only to see her father stomping his feet. A bunch of bad people. None of them are playing with me. I'm going to complain to Dan Yang. Then he turned around and ran away. When she turned around again, Jean Xin and the others were already standing behind her again. Chu Qingyan could not help but twitch the corner of her mouth. Chapter 1409. Xiao Ran came very quickly. Not long after Xiao Su's deployment was issued, he led his men to carry out the first wave of attack. In the dead of night, they killed people without leaving a trace. Fortunately, Xiao Su was prepared. Otherwise, this unexpected attack would have likely gone according to Xiao Ran's wishes. The usually quiet mountain forest was now filled with the sound of swords clashing, as if the world was about to be overturned. Swords flashed, flames soared into the sky, and figures with red eyes could be seen everywhere. Although the other party came silently, they had the advantage of being fully prepared before, so they were not caught off guard. Xiao Ran sat on the back of a horse and looked at the two armies that had sunk into a state of anxiety from a small hill. His face was red from the reflection of the flames and his eyes were shining brightly. It was as if he wanted to see through the layers of people and find the two familiar figures. It was just that there were too many people and he could not find them, but he was not in a hurry. His army of 100,000 was against Xiao Su's army of 100,000. Perhaps they weren't as strong as Xiao Su, but they were evenly matched. In this dark night, his sneak attack had taken advantage of the timing. At the very least, he could cause them to panic for a moment, and that was exactly what he needed. Your Highness, our people have surrounded them in the southeast and north. Yan Shi rode up the hill on his warhorse and reported. Very good, the plan is going well. Xiao Ran nodded, and there was a faint smile on his face. Yan Shi smiled, but when he recalled the scene half an hour ago, he could not help but shiver in his heart. Although they were a little caught off guard at the moment of the fight, they soon reacted and entered the combat state. The people trained by the King of England are really strong. Our two small teams were almost completely wiped out, but no matter how strong they have been confused by us and are now falling into our trap. If they are not strong, eldest brother is not worthy of the title of Sichuan God of War. Xiao Ran pulled his lips and looked back at the battlefield below. A gust of mountain wind blew, and his eyes were a little cold. Yan Shi nodded repeatedly. Your Highness is right. Otherwise, we wouldn't have spent so much effort to set this up. Xiao Ran did not respond to his words. It was as if his whole mind was on the battlefield. He stood beside him obediently and did not speak anymore. He watched the battle below intently. Although he did not show it on the surface, he was still shocked by the ferocity and valiance of the King of England's men. Although His Highness the Fourth Prince had said that there was no need to worry about them gaining the upper hand, and that as long as he could delay them and make them lower their guard, the final counterattack would be the key. But when he saw the battle, he was still deeply shocked. If he didn't know that His Highness the Fourth Prince still had some tricks up his sleeve, he probably wouldn't have the mental strength to deal with the situation in front of him. 100,000 against 100,000? It seemed like two weights that could be balanced on a scale. However, when one side was stronger than the other, the scale would tilt. For example, right now, the attacking enemy troops were approaching in waves. The fighting in the east, south, and north was endless. If they were not all blocked by Xiao Su's iron walls, they would be beaten to a pulp. Being attacked by others was a very annoying thing, but because they had already hinted that they had made the corresponding notification, the generals were not in a hurry to deal with it. There were several senior generals sitting in the military tent, such as Gao Hao, Hong Jianhua, Jing Guanghui, and so on. Lord, we have already defeated several waves of enemy troops, and they have suffered heavy losses. Before they came, I thought that they had a large number of people and we would not be able to win. Now it seems that they have overestimated themselves. At the end of the report, Jing Guangwei showed some disdain. With this level of strength, they dared to touch the whiskers of a tiger. They simply did not want to live. The other generals also reported the situation of the several armies under their command. Basically, their side had won, and their faces were full of joy. Since the beginning of the attack, Chu Qingyan had been summoned to the main tent. At this time, she was seriously listening to the reports from all sides. 2 hours ago, the enemy troops had suddenly appeared around the tent, and they had actually managed to hide from their scouts. They came with a fierce momentum, as if they wanted to fight to the death with them. This was the first time they had fought Xiao Ran head-on, but it surprised her because the other party's fighting methods were more mature than before, and also more frightening. 100,000 soldiers had silently concealed themselves from the spies they had set up, crossed the mountains and deep waters, and arrived at their side. Furthermore, they had chosen the most relaxed time to launch a full-scale attack at the first moment when they had yet to notice. They were bold and meticulous, and it was difficult to overlap with the gentle figure from back then. Her absent-mindedness was called back by a deep voice. "Are you sure they have 100,000 soldiers?" Xiao Su frowned slightly. Hong Jianhua immediately nodded. "That's most likely the number." Hearing this, Xiao Su's frown deepened. Chu Qingyan saw that his expression was not quite right and couldn't help but ask, "Is there a problem?" He meditated for a while, then slowly said, "Although he brought 100,000 soldiers to fight against our 100,000, and the numbers are about the same, he should know that the people under my command are all carefully selected, and the difference in strength is huge. But he still dares to fight force without hesitation. I keep feeling that something is wrong." Jing Guanghui stood up, a smile on his face. "Lord, you might not know, but this fourth prince doesn't know how to fight at all. Back when we fought against Nansong, we suffered a lot because of his careless command. Originally, we shouldn't have lost so badly, but in the end, we gave the cities to Nansong for nothing. So this general feels that this time, it is very likely that he is blindly commanding. We don't need to be so nervous." As soon as Jing Guanghui finished speaking, Hong Jianhua shook his head and said, "It is better to be safe than sorry. We can't underestimate the enemy." Chu Qingyan agreed with this and couldn't help but nod. She always felt that Xiao Ran had changed, and with so many people by his side, Shi Xian and Consort Yu's side, he wouldn't treat the life and death of 100,000 soldiers as child's play. However, no conclusion could be reached from the discussion, and for the time being, they would block soldiers with arms and water with an earthweir. After a night of fighting, the sky was about to brighten. Xiao Su let everyone go back to take turns to rest. "Big Ice Cube, what do you think Xiao Ran is thinking?" He recklessly sent troops to attack for an entire night, as if to vent his anger. Does he really think that he can destroy us like this? He is too naive. When only the two of them were left, Chu Qingyan spilled her guts. Hearing this, Xiao Su smiled faintly and patted her head. "I think he will make another move. Perhaps he will show himself after daybreak. Don't worry, let's wait and see." She thought about it and couldn't help but nod, but she still felt a little uneasy. "But to be honest, I keep feeling that we are very passive this time." Chapter 14:10. Xiao Su smiled and patted her head before taking his hand back. "Whether we take the initiative or not, the most frightening thing is that the other party doesn't make a move." "That's true." She nodded but fell into deep thought. Seeing that she was still unsettled, he was silent for a while and found a topic to divert her attention. "Don't you think what he did today was a bit familiar?" Chu Qingyan blinked. After Big Ice Cube's reminder, it did seem familiar. As she thought about it, she suddenly had a flash of inspiration. She could not help but blurt out, "Isn't this the move I used against Pang Huang?" Then she frowned. "But it's a bit different. Back then, I went into battle with light armor, but he had 100,000 soldiers. It was more difficult for him than for me." Xiao Su smiled coldly. He was able to avoid our eyes and ears and successfully bring such a huge army to us without being discovered because he was familiar with the way my spies investigate. That's why he was able to do this. Before Big Ice Cube finished speaking, she had already guessed it. She could not help but tug at his sleeve. So you taught him how to use spies before? Her words made the pair of black eyes darken. Because he did not have the intention to seize the throne, he only wanted to protect the country and the people wholeheartedly. And this fourth brother was also a candidate in his heart for the crown prince. In addition, his fourth brother was kind and gentle, so he slowly taught him the experience he had gained over the years bit by bit. He thought that if one day he was no longer an official in the court, he could be completely at ease and hand over the 3 armies and the world to him. But he did not expect that the plan could not keep up with the changes. And what he had done back then was used by his fourth brother as a sharp blade to deal with him. Now that he thought about it, it was too laughable. Sort of. Sensing the change in Big Ice Cube's mood, Chu Qingyan's feelings for Xiao Ran faded a bit. Biting the hand that fed him was probably talking about him. Not only did he use yours, he also learned mine. He fought against us without holding back. So this disciple wants to kill our 2 masters. Although she was angry, she couldn't do anything about it. She wanted to comfort the Ice Cube more, so she couldn't help but tease herself. Xiao Su knew what she was thinking. His brows relaxed and he smiled at her. As the saying goes, the devil rises 10. Whether or not he can gain anything will depend on the final result. Although I don't know what he's thinking for now, we can still see to what extent this disciple has learned. Perhaps the result will make you proud. Seeing that he was still in the mood to joke around, Chu Qingyan couldn't help but laugh along with him. That's right, we'll know if it's a mule or a horse. It was daybreak. Without the cover of darkness, the battlefield could be seen clearly. The 2 armies were still locked in a stalemate. Fourth Highness, as you expected, they didn't discover our goal because we did our best to hold them back. Fourth Highness really has a divine plan. Yan Shi received the report from below and immediately passed it to Xiao Ran. In the end, he couldn't help but sigh. Xiao Ran pursed his lips. My imperial brother is a meticulous person. If I didn't fight so recklessly, I'm afraid it's impossible for him to not realize it by now. Perhaps it's because I've never won a battle in the past, so it's easier for them to believe me. Right now, I'm just doing whatever I want without thinking. Fourth Highness is smart and farsighted. You can even see through the opponent's thoughts. This general admires you very much. Yan Shi hurriedly praised. Xiao Ran waved his hand. Let's talk about this after we win. Where's the second group now? When it came to business, Yan Shi's expression became more serious. They'll arrive today. Good. When everyone arrives, we'll act according to the plan. Xiao Ran stood on the hillside. His body was stained with dew for an entire night, but he didn't feel cold. On the contrary, his blood seemed to be boiling, as if a fire had ignited in his heart. He had always looked forward to being able to have a fair fight with his royal brother, but he didn't expect it to be on such an occasion. However, his obsession with Qingyan filled him with fighting spirit. This time, he wanted to prove to her that there was more than one outstanding man like his royal brother in this world. If she couldn't see him, then he would personally defeat his royal brother, the invincible god of war. He believed that this way she would definitely look at him in a new light. With this thought, Xiao Ran couldn't help but want to see what kind of expression those people would have when his plan matured. Just as the 2 sides were fighting in full swing, an army of unknown origins suddenly joined Xiao Ran's army. There were at least 50 to 60,000 of them. All of a sudden, there was a huge disparity in manpower. Xiao Su's side was repeatedly defeated. When Xiao Su received the news, many generals had already rushed into the main tent, bringing with them a lot of bad news. The soldiers had been fighting for an entire night, so they were mentally and physically exhausted. They originally thought that the 2 of them would have a short truce, but they never expected that reinforcements would arrive. Their stamina was above theirs, so they couldn't hold on any longer. Xiao Su's fingers clasped on the table. His expression was somewhat heavy. So this is his backup plan. He had led the first batch of troops to launch a sneak attack, attracting all their attention. Then, when they were exhausted, the second batch of troops would arrive. How could the exhausted army compare to their energetic reinforcements? This plan was indeed well thought out. However, it wasn't just that. This was because using numbers to delay was the stupidest tactic. The enemy came too suddenly. Our people had just reacted when their defenses were breached. There was already a huge disparity in stamina between the two sides, so they were already at a disadvantage. With the addition of numbers, if they were to clash head-on, they had no chance of winning. This prince understands. Xiao Su's calm and collected appearance was like a cool breeze blowing away the restlessness in the tent. The anxious generals couldn't help but feel ashamed when they saw this. They had followed the Lord through all kinds of storms, so how could they lose their composure when they encountered a small problem? Chu Qingyan was originally worried about these generals, but when she saw that they were quickly adjusting themselves, she couldn't help but sigh in relief. Turning her head, she saw a tall and handsome figure drawing circles on the map. When he stopped, she heard him speak coldly, his voice filled with understanding. "So it's like this. Did you find anything?" She moved closer. When he looked at the map, the other generals also looked over. They have placed layers of troops in the north, south, east, and west. Their goal is to drive us to the west. When Xiao Su's words fell, Chu Qingyan looked to the west. There were 2 or 3 connected mountains. She couldn't help but be puzzled. Isn't he afraid that we won't be able to find us after we enter the mountains? He should have already made his arrangements. Xiao Su threw down his brush and smiled coldly. Order people to withdraw into the mountains. Everyone did not hesitate and left to carry out the order. Chapter 14:11. After fighting for a day and a night, Xiao Su's army began to retreat to the west. When they retreated to the foot of the mountain, Xiao ran and the others also stopped attacking. The two sides were like hibernating leopards, eyeing each other covetously. Why didn't they pursue the matter after winning? Jing Guanghui looked into the distance and asked the person beside him in confusion. Hong Jianhua's face was serious. They waded through mountains and rivers to enter the battle. Everyone will be tired. Not only do we need to rest, they also need to rest. Don't lose your judgment just because they have the upper hand for a while. Jing Guangwei was embarrassed when he heard this. Then he said, "Didn't Lord say that their goal should be to drive us into the mountains? Why did they surround us at the foot of the mountain and not move?" Hong Jianhua shook his head, his voice more serious than before. "I don't know either. Lord said that the other side may be waiting for an opportunity, but I don't know what he is referring to." Jing Guangwei fell silent. The people beside him looked at the setting sun. Their expressions were like the thick clouds that could not be dispersed, heavy and heavy. At the foot of the mountain, all was quiet. Only the sound of soldiers walking and patrolling could be heard. But everyone knew that this was the calm before the storm. Everyone was more careful and did not dare to relax. In the main tent, Xiao Su and Chu Qingyan sat opposite each other. "Fourth brother already knows that you have been driven out of the camp?" Xiao Su poured a cup of tea for her and pushed it in front of her. His eyes were gentle, as if the tense atmosphere outside did not affect him at all. Chu Qingyan chuckled and said, "That's right. 2 days ago, I asked that spy to send him a message. I think that the only reason he dared to come here so brazenly is because he is certain that without me, Little Hai and the others would not listen to you." Last time, after she had subdued the army, she thought back and realized what Xiao Ran's plan was. Wasn't it to separate her from Big Ice Cube and not let her help? Without the eagles and wolves, even if Big Ice Cube's subordinates were elite soldiers, they could not compete with their numbers. After saying that, she supported her chin with one hand and smiled innocently and helplessly. "This disciple seems to have learned better than I thought." Xiao Su smiled and sipped his tea. He raised his eyebrows and looked at her. "Why don't you ask me how I found out?" Chu Qingyan snorted and said matter-of-factly, "Lu Bai was taken away by me and never came back. How could you not know? Could it be that your people are all useless? Besides, I didn't intend to hide it from you, so it's normal for you to know." Xiao Su chuckled. He liked it when she trusted him wholeheartedly. It was just like that day on the high platform. This feeling made all the pores on his body relax. After she finished speaking, she saw him leisurely sipping his tea with a smile on his lips. She couldn't take her eyes off him. The stranger was like jade, and the young master was unparalleled. From the first time she saw him, she knew that such a person was destined to be extraordinary, so she wanted to stay away from him. After all, the celestial items in the heavens were not something mortals like her could touch. However, fate tied the two of them together and they couldn't be separated. For the sake of her parents, she didn't dare to fight against the nobles and could only play her role obediently. However, God was kind to her. After letting her rediscover her family, God sent such a jade-like young master to her. From his cold-blooded appearance to his softest side, she had fallen deeply in his gentleness and didn't want to be separated from him anymore. The two of them held hands and went through ups and downs. Looking back, the things that they had experienced together could be written into a book. However, the latter half of their lives was still so long, and she still wanted to go on with him. Her gaze regained its focus and fell on him. He had the iron blood of a soldier, which had settled down after many years of fighting and killing enemies. At the same time, he also had the leisure of a hermit, such as at this moment. Although he was wearing a silver battle suit, when he held the teacup in his hand and tilted his head slightly, his gaze was calm and indifferent. She felt as if the two of them were in a high mountain with green leaves and red flowers beside them and birds chirping in the distance. Her mind couldn't help but think of a poem, picking chrysanthemums under the eastern fence, leisurely seeing the southern mountain. Suddenly, a pair of hands appeared in front of her eyes. She came back to her senses and looked up to meet those teasing eyes. Her cheeks couldn't help but heat up. She actually stared at him in front of the big ice cube like this. How could she be so unreserved? Although the two of them had already seen each other openly, she still felt incomparably shy. Xiao Su withdrew his hand and his gaze fell on her reddened ears. His lips curled into a devilish smile. We're already an old married couple. Why are you so easily shy? She pursed her lips and raised her voice to hide her embarrassment. Who said I'm shy? Which eye of yours saw it? Humph. Xiao Su gave a low laugh when he heard this. Only he could see such a childish side of her. He didn't say anything and instead laughed. This made her want to dig a hole to hide in. The heat rising from her face could be used to steam buns. Hey, you can't bully people like this. She pouted and reached out to tug at his sleeve, complaining about his actions. Her eyes were filled with innocence, grievance, and shyness. Xiao Su raised his head and put his hand on the back of her hand. He wrapped her little hand in his, and his fingers curled around her palm as he gently tickled it. His eyes were sparkling. Is this bullying you? What do you think? She glared at him. Just as she finished speaking, the person in front of her was already in front of her. His breath brushed past the hair by her ear, and his voice was ambiguous. I prefer to bully you in other places. His voice was too seductive, and her mind immediately thought of some discordant images. It was as if her entire body had been immobilized, and she was unable to move. Her entire body felt like it was on fire, and she could imagine that her face must be even redder than a cooked prawn. Xiao Su knew when to stop. Otherwise, if he couldn't stop in the end, the one who was teased would be himself. He straightened up and met the little fellow's accusing eyes. His eyes were filled with layers of laughter. All right, I'm just teasing you. Right now, even if I have that kind of heart, the situation won't allow it. After he left, she felt the frozen air suddenly relax. Hearing this, she unhappily rolled her eyes at him several times. But the more she glared at him, the happier he became. It really was too infuriating. As expected, after eating, he revealed his true nature. Her mind turned and she suddenly thought of something. Her eyes lit up. Xiao Su noticed the change in her. Just as he was about to ponder, the person was already in front of him. The beauty was like a flower, throwing herself into his arms. Moreover, it was the person he loved. How could he control himself, especially when she took the initiative to tease him? When he reached out to pull her into his embrace, Chu Qingyan immediately moved to the side of the curtain. She winked at a certain person whose face was filled with lust. "Who told you to bully me? Bye-bye." Xiao Su fiercely gulped down a large amount of herbal tea before the restlessness within his body was extinguished. He couldn't help but rub his forehead in both anger and amusement as he looked at the trembling curtain. What a little demoness. At this time, Hong Jianhua rushed into the tent with his men. "General, something bad has happened." Chapter 14:12. As soon as Hong Jianhua came in, he saw the displeased look in his master's eyes. The restlessness in his body instantly disappeared. He unconsciously shook his body. After being in a daze for a while, he came back to his senses. Before, he had scolded others. Now, he had made the same mistake. "Lord." He lacked confidence as soon as he spoke. "General Hong, you are the most experienced veteran in the army. Why are you still so rash? The soldiers can't interact with this king, so your words and actions represent this king's wishes. What will the soldiers below think if they see you acting so rashly?" Xiao Su's cold voice bluntly spoke to Hong Jianhua, completely ignoring the embarrassed and ashamed expressions of the generals behind him. Hong Jianhua immediately restrained his expression, lifted his battle robe, and knelt down. He straightened his back and said with incomparable shame, "This general did not lead well. This general is guilty. Please punish me, general." Xiao Su glanced at him indifferently before raising his hand to let him stand up. "Remember, there will be no next time." Only then did Hong Jianhua stand up gratefully, his expression becoming more and more serious. "What happened?" Xiao Su finally cut to the chase. After receiving instructions, Hong Jianhua immediately reported the news he had received. "The sun has just set, and Xiao Ran has launched another attack. Furthermore, it's very aggressive. It seems like he won't stop until he forces us into the mountains." Xiao Su raised his brows. "Didn't we already guess? Why are you still so flustered?" A general behind Hong Jianhua immediately replied, "That's not all. The mountain has been surrounded. If we really enter the mountain, we will be trapped and unable to move. Moreover, our provisions haven't arrived yet. We don't have enough provisions to last us 3 days. If we enter the mountain, we will run out of food. There's another important thing. An hour ago, we sent a small team to explore the mountain, but they were found dead in the cave. Their bodies were eaten by wild beasts." At the end of the sentence, the faces of several people became very ugly. "Lord, there are wild beasts in the mountains. I'm afraid there are more than 1 or 2 of them. This Xiao Ran wants to trap us in the forest not only to cut off our escape route, but also to let us fight with the wild beasts while he reaps the benefits." Xiao Su narrowed his eyes. Was that all? At this time, the people who received the news rushed to the tent. Chu Qingyan appeared in the tent as soon as she heard Jin Xian's report. "Then what should we do now?" Gao Hao asked the person in front of him. Xiao Su's expression was indifferent, and no one could tell what he was thinking. "You've rested enough. Bring your men into the mountains and restrain them well. Don't make any mistakes." "Yes." Although it was clear that there was a mountain of daggers and a sea of flames ahead, they firmly believed in the Lord's orders and obeyed. Everyone had their own troops and retreated to make arrangements. In the end, only Chu Qingyan was left because her troops were still escorting the supplies and had yet to return. "Big Ice Cube, I suspect that Xiao Ran has other motives." Chu Qingyan voiced her concerns. When she felt his encouraging gaze, she took a sip of tea and continued, "Although we're currently surrounded by them, we have a large number of people. It's impossible for them to trap 100,000 soldiers in the mountains. Even a rabbit will bite when cornered. Moreover, we're not rabbits. If they enrage us, the worst that can happen is that both sides will suffer losses. However, this won't benefit Xiao Ran at all. Because she didn't have an army at the moment, she wasn't as busy as the other generals. She didn't have time to look at the big picture, so she could see more clearly than the others. Husband and wife think alike." Xiao Su reached out and scratched her nose, then continued, "After all, Consort, you spent so much effort to nurture him. He's also a studious and intelligent person. He didn't show it in front of us in the past, but now that he's ruthless, he has Imperial Father's shadow. However, on the battlefield, it's all about strength. If he shows his true abilities, I'll see if he's qualified to be my opponent. One shouldn't covet one's brother's wife. This was an unforgivable mistake that Xiao Ran had made, and it was also an unforgivable mistake that Xiao Su couldn't forgive him for. Without regard for their feelings, more than 10 years of brotherly love had been destroyed. This time, he wouldn't be merciful. When Chu Qingyan heard this, she nodded in agreement. Big Ice Cube, don't worry. Even if he has a lot of tricks up his sleeve, there's no need to be afraid. We also have a backup plan. As she spoke, she winked mischievously at him. Xiao Su chuckled. You're the only one who's mischievous. Everything was as Xiao Ran expected. Xiao Su's army was pushed into the mountains. All the exits have been surrounded by our people. There's no need to worry about them escaping. When Yan Shi received the news, he immediately reported it to Xiao Ran. At this time, Xiao Ran was sitting in the tent. When he heard this, he couldn't help but walk out. Yan Shi followed closely behind. After standing at the top of the mountain, Xiao Ran looked into the distance. The originally dark forest was now as bright as day. He knew that was where his brother's army was. The corners of his lips curled up. They had already stepped into his plan step by step. Lu Bai had already sent word that Qin Yan had been chased out of the army, and her beast army was no longer of any use. Eldest brother was like a broken wing. With just these 100,000 soldiers, if he wanted to drag things out, he would be able to drag them to their deaths. Your Highness, when do we make our move? Yan Shi stood behind him and asked. There's no hurry. They're now on the tightest guard and can't achieve the best effect. Pass down the order to let the army rest for a while. There's still a hard battle to fight. Xiao Ran stroked his sleeve and replied calmly. Yan Shi nodded and turned to give orders to the general behind him. When he turned back, he saw a red figure with his back facing him under the light of the fire. He suddenly felt a little dazed. He didn't know when, but from that gentle and untainted youth, he had grown into a general who made people tremble in fear. Experience can make a person change. He had heard a little about what happened in the palace. He and Xiao Su's entanglement with Chu Qingyan. He couldn't help but sigh. At this time, a sentence pulled him back to reality from his memories. 4 hours later, let's move. Yan Shi composed himself. After confirming that he wasn't hallucinating, he immediately accepted the order. Hearing the footsteps behind him, Xiao Ran ordered the guard beside him. She was chased out not long ago. I believe she can't have gone far. Send a group of people to find her. No matter what, bring her back. After giving the order, Xiao Ran felt a lot more relaxed. He looked at the forest for a while and resolutely turned to leave. 4 hours later, on the top of the mountain, a row of archers was waiting. They pulled their bows, and the difference was that the arrowheads were poured with kerosene. At this time, they were aiming at Xiao Su's army deep in the mountains. Needless to say, there were many trees in the mountains. It could be imagined that so many arrows would be enough to destroy the forest. Release. Chapter 1413. Whoosh! The rocket left the bowstring and drew a beautiful arc in the sky, just like a meteor shower falling to the earth. As soon as they landed, they started a fire. Xiao Su's army did not move at this time. There were no screams, no sounds of fighting, only dead silence. Although they did not move, their expressions were not very good. The fire arrows fell from the sky and were blocked by the trees. They didn't hurt anyone, but they weren't aimed at people. Xiao Ran just wanted to turn this place into a sea of fire so that he could trap them. The trees were flammable, and the rockets were instantly ignited when they were inserted. All the generals surrounded Lord. Their faces were filled with anger towards Xiao Ran. Chu Qingyan glanced at everyone's reaction and could not help but sigh. This Xiao Ran really dared to do anything. Not to mention the lives of the 100,000 soldiers. Just look at the mountains. They rose and fell without end. If the fire was not controlled well and spread to the other mountains, then it would not just be 100,000 lives lost. The lives of the creatures in the mountains, as well as the villages near the mountains, would be incalculable. Chu Qingyan felt a chill in her heart. He was no longer the Xiao Ran of the past, the Xiao Ran who even brought back stray cats and dogs for her to help bandage. Now, things were still the same, but people were different. She only let herself reminisce for a while, but soon she pulled herself together and listened to everyone's discussion. Your Highness is right. They chased us into the mountains because they had a backup plan. They wanted us to be completely annihilated. This fire attack is really vicious. Yes, there are many ferocious beasts in the mountains. When the fire started, they all ran out. Just now, a soldier said that he had just killed 2 tigers and 3 leopards. It's too scary. Not only that, look at these rockets. They are all following the wind. When the fire started, it spread instantly. The fire is very fierce. Everyone was talking at once, but there was no anxiety or panic on their faces as Xiao Ran wanted to see. On the contrary, they were enthusiastic, as if they didn't care about the urgent matter in front of them. Chu Qingyan pursed her lips and looked at the person beside her. This disciple really wants to kill his master. Xiao Su sneered. Not exactly. He probably wants us to surrender, but his method is a bit ruthless. Xiao Ran was more cold-blooded than him. He actually thought of burning the mountain to force them. Even if he won in the end, it would cause a lot of suffering. I also did not expect him to use this move. Chu Qingyan sighed softly. With the wind blowing tonight, no matter the outcome of the battle between the two sides, the fire would definitely harm the innocent. Xiao Su looked into the distance, as if he wanted to see through the layers of flames. Unfortunately, he is wrong. Master is master. Chu Qingyan's lips curled in agreement. At this time, an eagle's cry came from the sky. She became alert and said in surprise, "Big Ice Cube, Little High and the others are back." Because the trees were spitting fire, Little High and the others could not fly down. They could only hover in the air. But it was different for beasts. Lord, Princess Consort's snow foxes are back. As soon as the soldier finished speaking, the crowd parted to form a path. Glutinous rice ball, snowflake cake, and white jade tang walked over with their heads held high and their chests puffed out, as if they were receiving a military parade. However, their elegance didn't last for more than 3 seconds. When they saw their master, how could they care about showing off their power? They happily pounced on her. Good. You've worked hard. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but rub their heads in amusement. After comforting them, she raised her head and said to Big Ice Cube, Bai Yutong said, "They are all waiting for your orders." As she said this, her gaze fell in a certain direction. Everyone followed her gaze and instantly widened their eyes. Some of the more timid ones directly sat on the ground in fright. My heavens, what the hell was this? Tigers, lions, leopards, foxes, wolves. Each of them had cold gazes. They were either sitting or squatting. Normally, they would feel terrified just by seeing one. Now that they were standing in front of her in a group, she couldn't see the end of them. It was like a dream, more like a nightmare. However, these ferocious beasts seemed to understand humans and were very orderly. They followed their own leader and didn't run around. They just stayed there obediently. Although the formation wasn't so neat, they each had their own camp. More importantly, these were all untamed beasts. It was already a blessing to be able to control themselves and not attack humans. But to be able to listen to someone's orders, that was simply a miracle. If they did not see it with their own eyes, they would not dare to believe it. Very quickly, everyone's gaze turned to the person standing next to their lord and speaking with a faint smile. They only had one thought at this moment, and that was for her to kneel. Princess Consort, we want to swear allegiance. Princess Consort was not only strong, she also knew how to control beasts. Once this powerful group of beasts came out, who could fight against her? At this moment, everyone was incomparably glad that they pleaded on the high platform that day and did not let Princess Consort leave. Moreover, their admiration for her instantly rose to the level of worship and reverence. She was simply shoulder to shoulder with the sun. Chu Qingyan did not notice everyone's gazes. She was only concerned about the battle. And Xiao Su saw everyone's reaction and was in a good mood. His people deserved this kind of treatment. Send out the signal. Let the people in the dark prepare to move. In 15 minutes, we will coordinate from the inside and outside. Xiao Su gave the order. Xiao ran, you are not the only one with a backup plan. We also have one. Hualing, Snowflake Cake and the others will follow you. Water Spirit, Glutinous Rice Ball and the others will follow you. Hualing and Water Spirit each jumped onto the back of a tiger. The two of them looked at each other and smiled. I never thought that there would be a day where I would be able to lead so many beasts into battle. After speaking, the two of them led the two groups of beasts and dashed in two opposite directions. General Wu, you lead some people and follow behind Hualing. General Jing, your people will follow Water Spirit. Xiao Su's order followed closely behind his little fellow. With the beasts clearing the way, their journey would be smooth and unobstructed. Yes. The generals immediately retreated and led their own troops in all directions. After the people around her left, Chu Qingyan tilted her head and reported to him, the beasts in the mountains have already been warned by Yutang and the others. They will not disturb our operation. The reason why Glutinous Rice Ball and the others were not around these days was because they went to gather people. When they came back, they conveniently taught the beasts in the mountains a lesson. They gathered those that could be used and made those that could not be used hide. Chu Qingyan could not help but feel that these three beasts had the illusion of dominating the mountains. She found it funny and also felt an inexplicable sense of pride. Well done. Xiao Su smiled faintly and nodded. Yutang raised its head and howled. Then, it rubbed against its master's palm to show that it was in a good mood. Xiao Su shook his head and laughed. Indeed, like master, like pet. After laughing, he returned to his cold and solemn self and said to the remaining people, it's about time for us to go. But Chapter 14:14. Chu Qingyan leaped onto a spotted tiger, and Yutang led the way in front. The herd of beasts was like an arrow leaving the bow, rushing towards the exit with great momentum. Xiao Su led the troops and horses to separate from her, advancing side by side. In the dark night, the sea of fire was monstrous, and the two groups of people were like a long sword, cutting a path through the sea of fire, unstoppable. Cries and roars resounded through the entire mountain forest, as if the sky was about to be overturned. At the top of the hill, Xiao Ran, who was resting with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes when he heard the roars. His face was full of disbelief. At this time, a soldier stumbled over, shouting as he ran, Your Highness, there's a beast attack, it's so scary, so many wolves, so many tigers. Before the soldier could finish his words, the sound of troops clashing could be heard, accompanied by the roars of beasts that shook the sky. Xiao Ran's eyes were fixed on the beasts that jumped out and bit everywhere, his eyes were red, and he was furious. How could this be? He muttered to himself. His plan was flawless, and he had calculated the right time, the right place, and the right people. How could there still be a change? At this time, a bright red figure appeared in his vision, dressed in bright clothes and riding a horse, with black hair and a long sword, a petite figure, but ruthless. He was so far away, but he could see every change of expression on her face clearly, as if he had practiced it countless times in his mind before. So that's how it is, that's how it is. He laughed lowly, and his laughter was incomparably sarcastic and unwilling. At this time, Yanshi had already received the news and ran over. His face was incomparably dignified. Things had happened so suddenly, and his voice could not help but be a little anxious. Your Highness, didn't you say that Chu Qingyan was not in the army? Where did these beasts come from? Why didn't we notice before? After asking all these questions, he realized that he had been rude and did not dare to raise his head to look at Xiao Ran. However, Xiao Ran did not take his rudeness to heart, and his eyes were cold. Lu Bai lied to us, Qingyan was not expelled. How is that possible? Lu Bai is one of us. Why would he collude with the other party to deceive us? Yan Shi was in disbelief. Xiao Ran sneered. He can only blame himself for being too stupid to have his identity exposed. That's why eldest imperial brother used him to sow discord. We listened to his words and attacked with all our strength without any defense. This move is really clever. When Yan Shi heard this, he panicked even more. Then didn't the King of England already guess our plan? So when they were chased into the mountains, they were just playing along? Not necessarily. Although he used Lu Bai, he didn't know about my plan. So, our plan is still a success. It's just that there were some accidents. Xiao Ran looked at the ferocious beasts below. A cold light flashed in his eyes. As for these beasts, they are not without weaknesses. Let the fire array deal with them. I don't believe that they are not afraid of fire. Hearing Xiao Ran's calm arrangement, Yan Shi was a little embarrassed that he had panicked over such a small matter. He calmed down immediately. I understand. I will give the order immediately. However, just as the two were talking, a black line, like ants, moved quickly from the other side of the plain, and the sound of fighting echoed in the forest. Xiao Ran's face changed and he asked sternly, "What's going on?" Soon, someone came to report, there are 50 to 60,000 of them, and the leader is a general under the King of England. Aren't his people here? How can there be reinforcements? After that, Xiao Ran pulled out his long sword and slashed at the trunk. I know, all of this is really his plan. I was fooled by him. How can I be so stupid? Why can't he use a trick that I can? He could cross the sea and bring people to sneak attack, and his brother could also use the same trick to pretend that his 100,000 troops were there. He was too confident that he didn't order people to inquire before the plan was carried out. Yan Shi was afraid that he would take things too hard and wanted to go forward to persuade him, but he saw him pull out his long sword, jump on the back of the horse and pull the reins. I want to go to the battlefield personally. Your Highness, you can't do this. You are the commander-in-chief, you should be in the rear. Yan Shi was frightened and immediately advised. My brother is not afraid to go to the battlefield personally. What should I be afraid of? Everything will be up to you to decide. Hiya. After Xiao Ran finished speaking, he immediately whipped his horse and galloped down the mountain. As soon as he went down the mountain, the soldiers immediately followed behind him in a grandiose manner. Yan Shi didn't have time to stop them, they had already run far away. He felt very uneasy, but the fourth prince was not someone he could persuade, so he could only accept his fate and carry out his orders. Beasts were the best targets to attack, because they were different from humans. They didn't have any fighting methods, and any attacks came from their instincts. They went up with a mouthful of sharp teeth and 4 sharp claws. This kind of attack was simple and crude, and it was difficult to defend against. Moreover, if you blocked one in front of you, maybe one would pounce on you from behind. Whether it was a wolf, tiger, or leopard, they were born with a sense of cooperation, and their cooperation was very tacit. These soldiers who were already afraid of them were not their opponents at all. Therefore, the encirclement was basically torn apart in seconds. Xiao Su and the others didn't even need to greet the soldiers who were surrounding them. With the beasts opening the way, they were simply unimpeded. The beasts were led by Chu Qingyan, so as soon as they left the mountain pass, she led her beast soldiers straight to the enemy's camp in order to disturb their formation. As long as the formation was in chaos, it would be easier for Big Ice and the others to clean up. Just as she retracted her sword and was about to continue forward, she heard a voice calling out to her. It pierced through the shouting and killing and came to her ears. She patted the piebald tiger under her, then turned around to look. Her gaze passed through the sea of people on the battlefield, and she saw a handsome figure sitting on a white warhorse. His black battle robe made him look tall and slender, but the expression on his face was no longer the one she was familiar with. Xiao Ran. After looking for a while, Chu Qingyan's cold face revealed a smile. Long time no see, Xiao Ran. As the two of them looked at each other, the two sides slowly approached each other. He stopped his horse at a distance where he could hear her greeting. The first thing that surged into his heart was joy. She was still willing to talk to him. But when he met her eyes, his body suddenly stiffened. Those clear and beautiful eyes were covered with a thin layer of frost, cold and distant, without the intimacy of the past. This was what he didn't want and didn't dare to see the most. His heart instantly became restless, and he wanted to change the situation. Qingyan, I was wrong in the past, but I had no choice. You know my feelings for you. I want to give you happiness. I want you to be happy for the rest of your life, and not have to worry about anything. Chu Qingyan looked at him coldly. Is that so? But why do I feel that all these worries and fears are because of you? You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.